All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think I'll wait just another few seconds to see if everyone can connect here. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back. It is 1:20 p.m. on November 6, 2023. This is the afternoon session of the hearing on the pending petition for change by the City of Solvang of water rate permit 15878. I'm hearing officer Nicole Kinsey, and I won't go through our introductions again or our caveats for the day. We'll just jump in and get started. I think where we left off with things, we were in the middle of the presentation of witnesses by the City of Solvang. And I believe where we are, Ms. O'Sullivan and Mr. Kim, is with the presentation of Mr. Mike Matthews. Is that correct? That's where we pick up?
That is correct.
Great. And I will look to the room to see if Mr. Matthews is here and we can get started. I don't see him on the screen quite yet. I don't think he's in the room with us. Do you know, Mr. Kim, I don't know if you had.
Well, he was present during the morning session.
During the present in the morning session, so he may just be logging it back in.
Yeah, and my colleague Jacob Metz is going to be working with him on his
great
cross-examination. So Jacob.
I know we're just jumping in after lunch and we're only 3 minutes in, so.
Yeah, let me shoot him a quick email.
So that was Mike just calling me. He can't find the link, so I'm going to resend him the link.
Okay, thank you.
Hold, please.
Technical difficulties, I understand that. And then maybe while we're waiting, Mr. Metz, do you have the, does Mr. Matthews have a presentation that we should prepare in the background to pull up?
He does, yeah. Can we pull up exhibit Solvang 169?
So let's, Mr. Wooldridge, don't pull it up yet, but just be ready with 169. I'll swear in Mr. Metz, I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews first.
I do apologize for that.
That's okay. Welcome, Mr. Matthews. I mean, I know you're right after lunch, so you're first on the hot seat here.
Yeah.
If you are prepared, I will go ahead and administer your oath. Are you all set up and ready to go?
I'm all ready to go. I just need my PowerPoint, if I could, to go off of.
We'll bring that up in a moment, but if you would raise your right hand, I'll administer the oath to you. Mr. Matthews, do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. You may proceed with your witness, Mr. Metz, and I think we're ready to pull up that presentation if that's what you'd like to see.
Perfect, thank you, and I see it appearing.
Okay.
Before you begin, Mr. Matthews, is Exhibit Solvang 169 a true and correct copy of the slides that you submitted in this matter?
Yes.
And is Exhibit Solvang 3 a true and correct copy of your written testimony in this matter?
Yes.
And are there any changes at this time that you'd like to make to either to the slides or your written testimony?
No.
Thank you. And at this time, you may go ahead and proceed with presenting your oral testimony.
Okay. My name is Mike Matthews. I've been working in the water utility for the last 22 years. 4 of it was with state water, where I was able to get my grade 4. I just became the supervisor 6 years ago for the city of Solvang. Next slide, please. And here you see the four sources of water. State water, project water. We have an entitlement of 1,500 acre-feet of table A water. We have 2 river wells, well 3 and well 7A. We have the upland groundwater wells, well 4, HCA South well, well 21, and well 22. And we have ID number 1 water, which is actually 2 sources. We have zone 1 and zone 2, where we're able, because we have 2 zones that we deal with. If you look to the graph here, I just want to note in this graph that you'll see where it's up in the it's pretty small, 1986 all the way to 1992, I believe. You see that we're using a ton of it. Looks really good. That is because we had actually well 7, which got washed away, which now we have well 7A. That plays a big factor as far as what we could produce back then versus what we can produce now. Because we lost that one somewhere in the 90s. I think it was 98 or something like that where we lost it. And we went with well 7A. But well 7A ended up getting silted in, which you can actually see right there about 1993.
I'm sorry, Ms. Kinsey. I'm going to object. This is outside the scope of his written testimony.
I'm sorry, Mr. Metz, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. His testimony does discuss well 5, which is the well that he is referring to.
I think he's referring to well 7A. That was my understanding.
I'm trying to show a difference because we're seeing these numbers and we're assuming that it's all because of the 2 wells we have existing. This is many years of lost wells, changes of wells, and I never stated anywhere has anybody talked about well 7, which obviously was closer to the river and can produce higher. And so I wanted to show how these graphs of why they're showing the river well is so low, because it looks like, as far as what I've heard from other people's testimonies, is that they've been stating that we never proved up. Well, it's kind of hard to prove up when you don't have the water to prove up with. So that's what I was just trying to.
I understand that, Mr. Matthews. I think the issue we're dealing with here is whether or not it was, and I'm trying to pull up your testimony. Mr. Metz, do you have reference in Mr. Matthews' testimony to well 7?
I have referenced, it's paragraphs 25 through 27 of Mr. Matthews' testimony refers to the city's 3 wells, river wells.
That's also what I would point to, and there's nothing about well 7 or the inferences that Mr. Matthews is drawing in his oral presentation.
So I think I agree with that, because well 7, as I understand, is different than 7A. Sounds like. So I think this is it's a fair objection. I mean, there does have to be testimony does need to be disclosed in writing in advance. So to the extent that we'll strike the discussion of well 7, well 7A is there. Do you have the same objection, Mr. Bivens, to the discussion of 7A?
No, I'm fine with the discussion of 7A in the sense that it exists. My objection is to the inferences that Mr. Matthews just admitted he was trying to draw that aren't in his written testimony.
All right, so let's, maybe this will be my direction to you, Mr. Matthews. If we can just move forward from the discussion of well 7, and on to whatever your next point is.
Okay,
From
okay,
there. Thank you.
not a problem. So 7A, I can discuss here. So what we're seeing on the graph with regards to the river wells is it ended up getting silted in, and I believe it was in 90 something like that. It got silted in.
Ms. Kenzie, I'm going to assert the same objection.
Yeah, no, I think that, so Mr. Matthews, if we can go forward and move on from the discussion of well 7 and 7A and their relative uses.
Okay, let's just go to the next slide then.
To the next point. Yes, next slide.
All right, and the current water future demands, the average of the city's annual total cost production from 1986 to present is 1558 acre feet. Total water production was highest in 1988 at 2,155 acre feet. Peak river well production was 1,368 acre feet in 1988. The city's primary water source switched in 2002 from river wells to state water. There has been a decline to total production because of the city's effective water conservation efforts, but production is expected to increase based on anticipated population growth. The projected future water demand at build out is 1980 acre feet a year. Next slide. So state water project. In the first decade of receiving state water in 2002 and 2012, the city received an average allocation of 1,087 acre feet a year. Since 2012, the average annual allocation decreased to 651 acre feet a year. State water delivery capability report anticipate that under projected 2040 conditions, the annual deliveries would be 51% of the total possible state water table A deliveries. Next slide. Upland wells. Upland wells have provided approximately 17% of the city's total water production. Upland wells typically produce lower quality water. Continued groundwater extractions at the current amount is uncertain because of basin management under Sigma. Next slide. ID number 1, water, is prohibitively expensive. ID number 1 charges the city over $4,000 per acre feet. The cost per acre foot for water from the river wells, upland wells, and state water, excluding fixed costs, is significantly less, under $300 per acre foot. It is unknown if large quantities purchased would have the same level of availability as the historical low quantities the city has purchased. Next slide. River wells. So 2011 Water Master Plan updated, classified the river wells as priority 1. State water was ranked at priority 2. The upland wells as priority 3, and ID 1 water as priority 4. In 2015, the city adopted the Integrated Water Supply Management Plan. 4 criteria were developed to prioritize the city's supply: cost effectiveness, availability of supply, supply reliability, and water quality. Each source was ranked as high, medium, or low in each category. The river wells were the only water source that did not rank low in any of these categories. The river wells ranked high in cost effectiveness and medium in availability, reliability, and quality. Next slide. So in conclusion, the city needs a balanced portfolio because of the unreliability of its sources. Without the river well project, the city will face serious reliability, quality, and cost concerns in supplying water now and into the future. The city's primary source of water, state water, is becoming increasingly unreliable. The upland wells are unable to provide quality water and may be subject to pumping limitations under Sigma. And ID number 1 water is prohibitively expensive to be a significant source of the city's water long-term. So thank you. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, I will turn to our usual order of cross-examination. So first, Mr. Stroud with the Parent District, do you have any questions?
No questions from me.
Thank you. ID number 1.
No questions.
Thank you. Alisal Guest Ranch.
No questions.
Great. And now to you, Mr. Bivens. Do you have questions for Mr. Matthews?
I do have some questions for Mr. Matthews. Thank you.
Great. Please go ahead.
All right, Mr. Wooldridge, could we have Mr. Matthews' written testimony, Solvang 3, up on the screen, please? And I'll go to PDF page 4, paragraph 17. Go and make sure I've got this. All right, the Zoom is hard for me. So Mr. Matthews, your written testimony states that the river wells were the city's primary water source until 2002, when the city began receiving deliveries of State Water Project water. Since then, State Water Project water has been the primary source. Did I get your testimony right there?
Yes, that is correct.
And then you go on to say that since receiving State Water Project water, and this is in the next paragraph, if we could scroll down to paragraph 18, please, Mr. Wooldridge, just so we're all literally on the same page. So you then go on to say, since receiving State Water Project water 2002 to present, the average production of the river wells dropped significantly to 15%, 214 acre feet per year, with State Water Project water accounting for 64%, 879 acre feet per year of Solvang's total production. Is that your testimony?
That is correct.
All right. And in support of that last statement, you cited Solvang 121. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And could we have Solvang 121 up on the screen, please, Mr. Wooldridge? So if we scroll up just maybe one click, please, Mr. Wooldridge. That's perfect, I think. Mr. Matthews, this table shows Solvang's production of water from the upland wells, the river wells, ID1 and State Water Project deliveries, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And it also identifies 2002 as the first year that Solvang received State Water Project water. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and then since the city started receiving deliveries of water from the State Water Project, it has never produced more than 429 acre feet from the river wells. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. I'd like to take a look at the city's progress reports under its permit 15878. So Mr. Wooldridge, if we could have Solvang 154 up on the screen, please. And Mr. Matthews, do you see that the page that's shown here shows a progress report that the city of Solvang submitted for permit 15878?
Yes.
And this first one is from the year 2000, correct?
Yes.
So, Mr. Wooldridge, can we scroll down 2 pages to PDF page 3. And then if we look at the text under items 2, 3, and 4, starting in the second sentence, it reads, the pumping capacity of the city's current wells is not sufficient to fully appropriate the quantities allowed by the city's permit. The city therefore plans to install new wells, both to increase its pumping capacity and to replace other wells that have been damaged by past flooding in order to prove up its use under its permit. Did I read that correctly?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and then if we could go to the next page, please, Mr. Woolridge. And this is a progress report for the same permit 15878, but from 2001, correct?
Yes.
And then if we could scroll to page 6, please. And now we have item 6E and 6F. Starting with the second sentence, this reads, the pumping capacity of the city's current wells is not sufficient to fully appropriate the quantities allowed by the city's permit. The city therefore plans to install new wells, both to increase its pumping capacity and to replace other wells that have been damaged by past flooding in order to prove up its use under its permit. Did I read those 2 sentences correctly, Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and that's the same language that I just read for the progress report from 2000, right? Okay, and you'd agree that these progress reports were submitted before Solvang started accepting deliveries of state water project water in 2002, right?
Yes.
And just for the record, Solvang has not, in fact, installed new wells as of the date of this hearing, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Let's go back, please, Mr. Wooldridge, to Solvang 121. Actually, you know what, Mr. Wooldridge, I will, in the interest of moving along, I'll skip this line. Let's have AHO 28, please.
Huh.
But I will come back to 121. Don't worry. Then I'd like to, so actually first, Mr. Matthews, this is an order denying a petition for extension of time requested by Solvang for permit 15878. Is that right?
I believe so. I'm not totally familiar with the older stuff. I mean, I was pretty much an operator, just starting.
Fair enough. Let's go to paragraph 4 of this order, please. And so paragraph 4 of this order states the division conducted a compliance inspection on August 11th, 1999, and found that there had been no changes in beneficial use of water or the place of use. Annual use and maximum rate of diversion were determined to be 1,053 acre feet and 1.85 CFS, respectively. And do you see that?
Yes, I do see that.
Okay. And then in paragraph 5, if we could scroll down just a hair. Thank you, Mr. Wooldridge. The 1, 2, 3rd sentence states, referring to the petition for extension of time, states that full development would occur in 1997. Do you see that, Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
And then now, Mr. Wooldridge, if we could go back to exhibit 121. And let's take a look at 1997, please. And Mr. Matthews, what was Solvang's total production from the river wells in 1997?
It was 141 acre feet.
Well, that would be a great answer for me, but it doesn't result in a very good record. So maybe if you look over one column to the left.
Oh, the total production. I'm sorry. My bad. That would be 1644.
No, let's try again. Do you see the column marked river wells, Mr. Matthews? That's column C.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was on the wrong one. It is 1,025.
So that was the total amount of production. 1,025 acre feet was the total amount of production from the river wells in 1997, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Matthews. Let's go back to Exhibit Solvang 3, page 4, please, Mr. Bridge. And then I'm at the very top of the page, right above paragraph 13. And you've written there in the second full sentence from the top, the city is experiencing population growth that will inevitably increase water demands. Is that your testimony, Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Okay. In paragraph 13, your testimony states, based on the city's draft 2040 general plan land use alternatives report, the city's population is expected to increase from 6,126 to 8,357 by 2040. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And Solvang submitted a copy of the general plan land use alternatives report population and household projections as exhibit Solvang 128, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, let's pull that exhibit 128 up, please, Mr. Woolbridge. Okay, and Mr. Matthews, I'm just going to draw your attention to the very first paragraph at the top of the page. So according to the census, Solvang's population in 2020 was 6,126 people, right?
Yes.
That is an actual number.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then it goes on to about a growth trend, and it says the growth trend between 2010 and 2020 shows a CAGR of about 1.6% for population and slightly lower for households, correct?
That's correct.
And CAGR stands for compound annual growth rate, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The last sentence indicates that this report applied the historical, or strike that. So the last sentence indicates that this report applied the 1.6% compound annual growth rate to the 2020 households and population numbers to get to that 8,357 population estimate for 2040 used in paragraph 13 of your testimony, correct?
Yes.
And if you look at the very next paragraph, the first sentence reads, these growth projections are substantially higher than the growth previously projected by SBCAG, which in 2017 estimated a population growth rate of 0.4% and a 0.6% household growth rate. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And then it goes on to say, it should be noted that these rates were very similar to data estimated by the California Department of Finance, which is the state's official agency for demographic projections. Is that right?
Yes.
And so then if you use the, and actually, hang on one second, SBCAG, that stands for the Santa Barbara Council of Area Governments. Is that right, Mr. Matthews?
I'm not sure, but I think so.
Sounds roughly correct.
I'm not really sure. I mean, but yeah, Santa Barbara, yeah, but I'm not sure about the CAG, but that's the same thing as the other one, then yes. You know, this the CAGR and this one CAG, Santa Barbara.
Well, we just established that CAGR means compound annual growth rate, correct?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what this really means. That's the thing. I'm not really sure.
Okay, but some other, according to this report, some entity called SBCAG estimated lower population growth rates
Okay.
2017, correct?
Okay, yes.
All right. Okay, and then so using the SBCAG projected growth rates, Solvang would have a population of 6,730 in 2040 with a household count of 2,850. Is that right?
Yes.
And so all of the things being equal, Mr. Matthews, you would expect 2040 water demands in a Solvang with 6,730 people to be lower compared to a Solvang with 8,357 people, right?
I couldn't predict that. I mean, all of these are prediction numbers, I believe.
Right. Well, I'm not asking you to make any
If you look,
predictions, Mr.
you can
Matthews.
look in the past on the other ones, and it says we should be at a population right now of 57, and we're not.
Right. So
Well,
Mr. Matthews, that wasn't my question. My question was, all of the things being equal, would you expect a Solvang with 6,730 residents to demand more or less water than a Solvang with more than 8,300 residents?
more water.
You would expect
The
a
residents,
Solvang with a smaller population number to demand more water than if the population was larger?
I think either way you look, I think that even if you had a few hundred or a few thousand, you should always want more because your wells aren't guaranteed. You lose them, they break. You have a diverse portfolio. You know, you don't want to just meet the demand. You want to have a little extra. So yeah, I think that
I'm going to move to strike all of that as non-responsive, Ms. Kinsey.
That's fair, and I'll hold the strike, but that's stricken.
And I'm going to move on if you were going to.
If you're ready to move on, I mean, I think we get the point. Thank
Okay,
you.
very good. So let's go back to Solvang 3, please, Mr. Woolridge. And I'm looking at paragraph 14. So in paragraph 14, Mr. Matthews, you've testified that based on future development capacity within the general plan, it is estimated that the city's total water production will increase to 1,980 acre feet by 2030. And then you go on to cite Solvang 119 after that sentence, correct?
yes.
Okay, so let's have Solvang 119 PDF page 11, please. Okay, and I am looking at the paragraph right above, what is it, table 2. Yes, okay, we're right there. Good. And I want to make sure I understand just like how Solvang arrived at this 1980 acre foot demand number. So, Mr. Matthews, you've read this document before, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
briefly, but yes, I have.
All right. So my understanding based on this document is that the first step in estimating 2040 demand was to determine that there will be a total of 2,949 dwelling units in Solvang at full build out. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And so because there were already 2,485 units in Solvang as of January 2011, that would mean that according to this document, at least, we could expect an additional 464 units to be constructed by 2040, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so this document then calculated an estimated 289 acre feet per year of demand to satisfy those units by multiplying the 464 units by an estimated 2.353 people per unit times an average water demand of 236 gallons per day per person. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes.
Okay. And then Solvang 119 here also states that the long-term average production of water was 1,691 acre feet, correct?
Yes.
So if you add that 289 acre feet per year to 1,691, you get 1,980 acre feet per year of demand, right?
That is correct.
All right, let's go back to solving 121, please. And I am going to want to look at cells F67 and F64. So if we could scroll down just a hair there. Okay, so Mr. Matthews, let me just direct your attention to cells F67. That shows that Solvang's average production of water across all sources from 1986 through 2022 was 1,558 acre feet per year, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then if you look at cell F64, that shows the average production across all of Solvang's sources of water from 2002 through 2022 as being 1,380 acre feet per year, correct?
That is correct.
And so if we were to add the 289 acre feet per year of additional demand identified in the document we looked at previously to that 1,380 number, we could get a different demand estimate of 1,669 acre feet per year, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Wooldridge, I will have exhibit Solvang 129 now, please.
And I wanted to get a time check from you, Mr. Bivens. I think we've been going on around 26 minutes. I just wanted to see where you're at in your cross-examination here.
I think I am roughly halfway through.
All right, well, then I would encourage you to move forward as efficiently as possible.
I will make every effort to do that. I will note that I think my cross from the last witness was about 40 minutes, and
Yes.
And Mr. Matthews' testimony is roughly twice as long, so I'm going to be extra efficient. All
Great.
right, let's so Mr. Matthews, this integrated water supply management plan is a document that you relied on in preparing your written testimony, correct?
Yes.
All right. And let's go to PDF page 25. We're going to go back to table 2.3. And then, Mr. Matthews, this table shows that the city's population in 2010 was 5,245 people, correct?
Yes.
And then it projects the city's population in 2040 at 6,454 people, correct?
That's correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is less than the projected population that.
I'm going to object. This is a very similar line of questioning that has already been advanced with respect to Mr. Murphy. And seeing as Mr. Bivens has consumed 45 minutes in the previous testimony and more on the prior one, it seems a bit repetitive and an undue consumption of time.
And I'll just do I need to briefly respond to that?
Yes, you do, please.
Well, Mr. Murphy wasn't able to answer questions about this document because he'd only been employed by the city by his testimony for the last 6 months. So Mr. Matthews is prepared to answer my questions about these population projections and demand projections.
I think that's fair. I'll allow you to go forward, Mr. Bivens. Let's, just please be efficient.
Yes. Understood. Okay, where was I? So Mr. Matthews, we see that according to table 2.3 here, the city is projecting its water demand in 2040 as 1,828 acre feet, correct?
Oh, yeah. Where are we at here?
We are looking at table 2.3 right there on the screen. Projected production in 2040, that's 1,828 acre feet, right?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. And that projection is based on an estimated per capita water use of 232 gallons per day in 2040, correct?
That is correct.
And that's higher than the per capita water use in 2010?
Yes.
And okay, we'll move on from that. And well, and it's lower than the 236 gallons per capita per day used to develop your 1,980 acre feet per year demand projection, your testimony, correct?
No. Because the population isn't correct.
So, Mr. Matthews, actually, you know what? I think
I mean, it is, but it isn't. It is for its time frame. I mean, what's a prediction? It's
well, Mr. Matthews, maybe we can short circuit this here. This projects a lower demand. This document projects a lower demand in 2040 than the demand projection that you identified in your testimony, correct?
that is correct.
Okay, very good. And if you used a lower per capita, if this document had used a lower per capita demand number, the expected 2040 demand would be even lower according to this document, right?
Believe so, yes.
Okay, so I just want to run through a short math exercise with you, Mr. Matthews, and make sure we're looking at per capita demand in the same way. So if we could go back to Solvang 121, please, Mr. Wardridge. And I'm going to look at row 54 there, production for 2020, Mr. Matthews.
Okay.
And Solvang's total production of water in 2020 was 1,285 acre feet, correct?
That's correct.
And its population in 2020 was 6,126, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So if I wanted to estimate Solvang's gallons per capita per day demand for 2020, I could start by multiplying the total production in acre feet by approximately 325,900 to convert that total production number to gallons, right?
Okay.
All right. And if I told you I performed that calculation and I got 418,781,500 gallons, you wouldn't have any basis to disagree with me, correct?
Objection, calls for speculation.
It's math. It's math. I mean, it's we can all do it on a calculator. What do you suggest, Mr.? I guess I'm gonna.
Well, I can-
You want me to do the math or something? Is that what?
Well, I just asked if he doesn't have a basis to disagree with me. If it would, you can, if he has a basis to disagree with my
No,
calculation.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Yeah, I mean,
All right. Excellent. I am not going to fudge the numbers, by the way, Mr. Matthews. So, but we'll.
I mean, and I don't think anyone suggests that, Mr. Bivens. There is unintentional error, but I think we're with you on this.
All right. All right. Okay. And then I could divide that, big old number of gallons by population of 6,126 to get the annual per capita demand in gallons, right?
Yes.
And then if I told you I went ahead and did that division calculation and I got 68,361 gallons per capita, you wouldn't disagree with me, correct?
I wouldn't disagree.
Okay. And Mr. Matthews, just so we've got a clear record, I just want to make sure that when you answer my questions, you speak clearly into the microphone because I'm getting some muffling.
Okay, sorry.
All right, no worries. Okay, so then I could divide the 68,361 gallons by 365 to get gallons per capita per day, correct?
Yeah.
And if I told you I performed that calculation and got approximately 187.3 gallons per capita per day, you wouldn't disagree with me, correct?
Wouldn't disagree.
Okay, very good. And just so we're clear, that number, because it includes total production, also includes demand associated with tourism in 2020, right?
Is that for me? Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Tourism too, yeah.
Yes.
I would-
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Matthews. And by the way, all the questions will be for you.
Okay, sorry.
I hope something's gone wrong if I have to ask somebody else a question. All right. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to go back to.
So, Mr. Bivens, I'm going to have an ask. This is maybe would you write all the calculations you just walked through? I mean, I could go to the Zoom transcript, which won't help. could you write them down? It doesn't matter to me if it's on a piece of paper or whatever, and send it in, just the numbers
Yes.
as you intended them, and send them in so we can all do the math ourselves, which is helpful. You know, these things happen. We can all do the math. I would appreciate that, and send it into the AHO. We'll come up with something. I don't know if we'll call it an exhibit. We'll figure out something. I think that would be helpful.
Is absolutely doable, and we will do that at the conclusion of
Thank
today.
you.
Okay, I want to go back to Solvang 129, please, the Integrated Water Supply Management Plan. So I have a couple more questions about state water. And I'll have PDF page 55, please. Okay, and I'm looking at 4.7.3, please, Mr. Woodridge. So in the second sentence under dry year supplies, this document recommends that the city investigate some options that follow to improve the dry year reliability of its supplies, right, Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
And so if you can just scroll down 2 pages, please, Mr. Woodridge. And I need to orient myself. Can we scroll down a little further to the recommendation? Aha, there we go. And then the second sentence in the last paragraph, right above section 4.7.4, recommends that the city continue to identify opportunities for banking or dry year exchanges using its state water project entitlement. Do you see that?
No, where was that at? I'm sorry.
That is sentence number 2 in the last paragraph directly above section 4.7.4.
Okay, yeah, I see it. Yes.
And your written testimony didn't discuss that recommendation in any way, did it?
Oh, actually, I don't know if it did. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Fair enough. Let's go back to Solvang 3, please, Mr. Woodridge. And Mr. Matthews, I'm just going to ask you a few questions about the cost of water from ID number 1. So, and I'm, let's see, let's go to PDF page 8, paragraph 38, please, Mr. Woodridge. Okay. So paragraph 38 of your testimony states, in total, water purchased from ID number 1 is priced at a standard residential rate that costs approximately $4,487 per acre foot, including the fixed monthly charges, which is very high relative to the city's other supplies, which are under $300 per acre foot. Is that your testimony?
That is.
And Mr. Matthews, do you recall, well, Mr. Matthews, you were observing my cross-examination of Mr. Vanderlinden this morning, correct?
Yes.
And you recall that in paragraph 8 of his testimony, he stated the cost of water from the river wells was approximately $800 per acre foot in 2020?
Yeah.
And you also recall him stating that the cost of pumping water from the upland wells was $700 per acre foot in 2020, correct?
Yeah.
And those numbers are considerably higher than $300 per acre foot, correct?
That is correct.
How did you, just for the record, how did you calculate that $300 per acre foot cost for the city's other supplies?
I did it for a standard price range that I can see on, our powering cost today. He put in he's more conservative, I believe, with his numbers than I am. I took the power cost that we have today, the bills that I see and approve, and I just put the cost all together per acre foot.
And you did not submit that underlying document as part of your written testimony, correct?
No.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Done with that. Let's Mr. Woodridge, let's have Solvang 93, please. And let's see, PDF page 9, please, Mr. Woodridge. This is, I'm going to focus on the subparagraph C here, 5.5C specifically. And the first sentence of that subparagraph, Mr. Matthews, provides in part that Solvang shall be entitled to receive water from ID number 1 at a supplemental rate under certain conditions, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then if we look at I think it's the third sentence from the bottom of the page. Let's see. It provides that the supplemental rate shall be equal to the ID number 1 then existing domestic rate, correct?
Where do you see that at?
I believe it is the third sentence from the bottom of this page. The supplemental rate shall be equal to the ID number 1 then existing domestic rate.
Yes.
Okay. And to your knowledge, would that supplemental rate be a lower rate than the rate ID1 has historically charged Solvang for water?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, well, to your knowledge, would that supplemental rate be lower than the rate ID1 has historically charged Solvang for water?
That I don't know. To be honest with you, I couldn't answer that. I don't.
Okay. Fair enough. Move past that. And let's just go back to very quickly, Mr. Wooldridge, to Solvang 3, paragraph 38, please. So that $4,487 per acre foot charge from ID1 that Solvang pays currently, that includes fixed monthly charges, correct?
Yeah.
And those are specifically $2,828.19 per month for zone 1 and $1,767.62 for zone 2, correct?
Yes.
And so Solvang will pay those fixed monthly charges regardless of whether it takes water from ID1, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, very good. All right, and now let's go, Mr. Wooldridge, please, to page 7 of this document, paragraph 30. So, Mr. Matthews, your testimony here states that the total production from the upland wells in 2022 was 462 acre feet, correct?
Yes. Yes, I do.
And that's the highest amount of water produced from the upland wells since 2001, right?
Yeah.
Was that a yes?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so. Yes.
Okay, great. And that was from a total of 4 wells, correct?
Yes.
And that level of production in 2022 occurred after Sigma was adopted, right?
That I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. So let's go to paragraph 35 of Mr. Matthews' testimony, please. Now, you've stated here that the city completed drilling for several new wells, including the HCA middle well and well 23, but these wells are not yet operational. Is that right?
Well 23 is not HCA middle well. It's in the works right now, but it's going out to get done.
Okay.
It's not. They're not completed yet.
They're not extracting water from.
No, they're not extracting water.
Okay, very good. And just to clarify, it says the city completed drilling for several new wells, including those 2. Are there other wells that the city has completed drilling for?
No.
Okay. Do you happen to know the design capacity of these 2 wells, Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, 23 should be 300 gallons per minute, and HCA middle well, I believe it's 2 or 225, something like that. Gallons per minute.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. I will go to PDF page 12, please, Mr. Wooldridge. And I'm going to take a look at paragraph 56, please. Okay, and so in paragraph 56, you have written that continued groundwater extractions at the current amount is uncertain because of basin management under Sigma, right?
Yes.
And you've also indicated that Sigma was adopted by the legislature in 2015. And so that was before Solvang drilled the HCA middle well and well 23 referenced earlier in your testimony, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you. And then so looking at paragraph 57 of your testimony, you've indicated that an entity called the EMA GSA manages the area of the Santa Ynez River Valley groundwater basin where wells 4, 21, 22, and HCA South are located, correct?
Yes.
And EMA GSA stands for Eastern Management Area Groundwater Sustainability Agency, correct?
That's correct.
And I take it that the HCA middle well and well 23 also fall within the boundaries of the EMA GSA, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
All right. And Solvang actually formed the EMA GSA with ID1, the parent district, and the Santa Barbara County Water Agency, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. All right, we'll go with that. So Mr. Matthews, if we're gonna, let's take a look at paragraph 59, please, on the next page. And you've written here, to sustainably manage the basin, the EMA GSA will implement and develop management actions that may place limits on pumping through fees or pumping allocations, correct?
That's correct.
And you go on to point out that the EMA's groundwater sustainability plan contemplates potential management actions, including levying groundwater pumping fees, as well as pumping allocations and restrictions on the amount of water that can be pumped annually from the basin, correct?
Mr. Matthews, if you could just make sure you're close to the mic. I want to make sure we're picking up your answers. Thank you.
Okay, where was I? Okay, sorry, Mr. Matthews, in developing those, the opinions you've expressed in paragraph 59, you relied on the EMA GSA's groundwater sustainability plan, correct?
Yes.
And Solvang submitted an excerpt of the GSP, of section 6 of the GSP, entitled Projects and Management Actions as Exhibit Solvang 116, correct?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Wooldridge, let's have Solvang 116 up on the screen, please. And I would like to get to PDF page 2. All right, let's see. Let me direct your attention to the second through fourth sentences in the second paragraph on this page, Mr. Matthews, the second full paragraph. Those read, yeah, thank you, Mr. Wooldridge. The identified potential management actions and potential future projects are categorized into 3 groups, with the management actions included in Group 1 to be initiated within 1 year of GSP adoption by the EMA GSA. The Group 2 management actions and Group 3 projects may be considered for implementation in the future as conditions in the basin dictate and the effectiveness of other management actions are assessed. It is important to note that the Group 2 management actions and Group 3 projects may not be necessary if the implementation of the Group 1 management actions results in conditions within the EMA that are trending towards meeting the EMA GSA sustainability goals and measurable objectives. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you do.
Okay, let's go to PDF page 5, please. And if we could scroll down just a hair, please. There it is. You see the row entitled Groundwater Pumping Fee Program, Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Okay, and there's a column that says required permits. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And then in that row for groundwater pumping fee program, the required permits are identified as Proposition 26/218 or local ballot initiative. Do you have an understanding of what that means for the groundwater pumping fee program?
No, not really. I don't.
Okay, to your knowledge, has Solvang obtained any of the required permits mentioned in that column?
That I do not know.
Okay, and it's been a year, at least a year since the EMA GSP was adopted, right?
Hmm.
Sorry, was that a yes?
I believe that's it. Yeah, I believe it was.
Okay, and the groundwater pumping fee has not been implemented yet, correct?
That I don't
This
know.
goes beyond the scope of the testimony.
This is Mr. Metz. It's cross-examination in our system. Mr. Bivens is free to ask Mr. Matthews questions, that any questions he would like, as long as they're relevant to the proceeding. So
Yeah, and I don't know to answer your question.
You don't know that the groundwater pumping fee has been.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if the fee has been implemented or not. I don't really take care of the fee aspect on operation and maintenance.
Understood. So, all right, we're going to finish up here pretty quickly. Let's go back to exhibit Solvang 90. No, that's not the right one, Mr. Wooldridge. I'm looking for Solvang 90, which is the 2011. Yes, thank you. And I'll go to PDF page 13, please. And if we, well, actually at the very bottom, I will just scroll down so we can see table 2.4. Thank you, Mr. Wooldridge. And second to last sentence right above that table reads, the city currently has a total of 1.24 million gallons of gross water storage. Do you see that, Mr. Matthews?
Yes, I do.
And then if we could go to PDF page 15, please, Mr. Wooldridge. Okay, and then the last, I believe that's the last full paragraph on the page at the bottom there below 2.5. That reads, the present storage volume in the Solvang water system of approximately 1.2 million gallons is inadequate by approximately 300,000 gallons. Now, this is consistent with reports by the Water Division staff regarding current difficulties in meeting peak hour demands in the summer on peak tourist weekends. It is recommended that the storage deficiency be addressed prior to significant additional development within the city. Did I read that correctly, Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, but there's more to it.
Okay, well, let's get to that. Let's go back to Solvang 3, please, Mr. Wooldridge. And I'd like to go to page 9, paragraph 43. And you have written here in paragraph 43 of your testimony that the city currently has a total of 1.25 million gallons of gross water storage, correct?
Yeah.
And so the city has not yet developed the gross storage volume recommended in its water system master plan update from 2011, right?
It's in the works.
It hasn't yet developed that 1.5 million gallons of storage, correct, Mr. Matthews? Okay, thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Matthews.
thank you, Mr. Bivens. I'm going to give Mr. Matthews, well, all of us a brief break, and then we will return and I will look to the fisheries entities for cross-examination. So let's break for 10 minutes and we will return at 2:33. Thank you.
We not just him.
Hey, Mike, this is Tilden. Mike,
Hey, yeah.
Mike, you should put yourself on mute.
Huh?
You should put yourself on mute.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm just looking to make sure we have our appropriate attorneys on the line here. There's Mr. Metz. Wonderful. Well, it's 2:34. I'll go ahead and get started. We can always circle back if we need to. Ms. Germanario, I'm not sure if you're on the line, but my first question is going to be whether CDFW has questions for Mr. Matthews.
We do not.
Thank you. Ms. Hall.
No questions here.
Okay. And then Ms. Beal, does NIMS have questions?
Just a couple, yeah.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Just a couple short questions that relate to Solvang Exhibit 129 that you also reference in your presentation summary. I'm going to not ask to have that pulled up, but if you would like to see it, please let me know. I just wanted to go back and touch on the criteria that you state were used in developing that document. And those criteria that you cited to were cost effectiveness, availability of supply, supply reliability, and water quality. Do you recall that part of your testimony?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. In which of those criteria did the city consider the potential effects to species protected under the Endangered Species Act, namely steelhead?
Take that one more time, if you could, please.
In which of those criteria did the city factor in or consider the effects of whichever source you're analyzing, the effects to ESA listed steelhead?
That I don't know.
Okay, thank you. As the utility director, is that your title?
Supervisor.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Supervisor.
Matthews, I'm having trouble hearing you. I just can you repeat that answer one more time, facing towards the microphone? And maybe, oh, because Mr. Matthews might be frozen here. Now you're back online, looks like. Maybe Ms. Beal, if you don't mind, can you repeat the last question and we can pick up from there?
I'm going to rephrase anyway, so we can disregard that question. I would just, Mr. Matthews, as part of your responsibilities in working for the city, are you responsible for ensuring that the city's operation of the pumps is compliant with the Federal Endangered Species Act?
That I don't know, to be honest with you.
So you're not sure whether that is your responsibility or not?
Yes, because there's no director as of right now, and the director usually took care of a lot of those things.
Okay.
That I don't know, to be honest with you.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. I'll look to my team if Mr. Wooldridge or Mr. Anderson, do either of you have questions for Mr. Matthews? I don't have any questions.
I have no questions.
No.
Great, thank you. Then I will turn to you, Mr. Metz. Do you have redirect for your witness today?
Thank you. Just a couple questions.
Go ahead, please.
May we pull up exhibit Solvang 129? Mr. Wooldridge?
Solving 129. We like that one.
And page 44. Mr. Matthews, can you see table 4 there, cost of supplies?
Yes.
Do you recognize that table?
Yes, I do.
And on the right-hand column there, it says annual unit cost. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it lists the city's 4 sources of water. Is that right?
That is correct.
And for river wells, it shows an annual unit cost of $210 per acre foot.
Yes,
And for the upland wells, it shows $200 per acre foot.
yes,
And is that consistent with your testimony in paragraph 38, where you say that the annual unit cost is under $300 per acre foot?
yes, I do.
And you're asked about Mr. Vanderlinden's testimony, where he said the unit cost was approximately $700 or $800 per acre foot. Do you recall that testimony,
Yes, I do.
or that line of questioning, I should ask?
Yeah.
And Mr. Vanderlinden, if you recall, said that he was considering various factors, including treatment costs, conventional treatment, disinfection, and other treatment costs. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Would that be a reason as to why there could be a differentiation in the annual unit cost that you're seeing in table 4.1 in the testimony of Mr. Vanderlinden?
yes,
And the cost per acre foot for state water project water is approximately $266. Is that your understanding, Mr. Matthews?
that's my understanding. Yes,
And the cost per acre foot for ID number one water is over $4,000 per acre foot, roughly.
that is correct.
And may we shift over now to Solvang 3 on that other tab there? And we move up to paragraph 37. Mr. Matthews, you're also asked about those fixed monthly charges for ID number one water, which are shown there in line 19 of paragraph 37. Do you see those fixed monthly charges?
I do.
And in paragraph 38, the total charge is $4,487 per acre foot. Do you see that, Mr. Matthews?
Yes,
So the cost per acre foot then for ID number one water would be still a couple of $1,000s per acre foot. Is that right?
yes,
And doing basic math, that is significantly higher than $266 per acre foot for state water project water. Is that right?
yes,
Would the city be economically incentivized to use state water project water because it's a cheaper source?
yes.
Shifting gears a little bit, the last thing I want to touch on is briefly is the reliability concerns of the groundwater wells. You were asked about the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA, and its impact on groundwater wells. Do the groundwater wells also have quality concerns?
Yes, I do.
And do those quality concerns place limitations on the use of groundwater?
Yes, they do.
And can you describe for us what those limitations are?
Yeah, there's arsenic, H2S, hydrogen sulfide. There's nitrites that are located in the upland wells. Those are the main ones that we have.
You're also asked to take a look at progress reports that the city submitted in 2000 and 2001. Do you recall that?
I'm trying to remember back. Yes, I do.
Those progress reports were submitted before the city started receiving state water. Is that your understanding?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Metz. I will look to the room at this point to see if, based on that limited redirect, anyone has any additional questions for Mr. Matthews. All right. Then with that, Mr. Matthews, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time you're spending here with us. I really appreciate your testimony and thank you for being here, and you're excused from this proceeding today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I will look to the City of Solvang team. Are you prepared to move forward with Mr. Nicely, or do you need a moment to reorganize? Oh, I see Mr. Nicely on the screen.
Good afternoon. Yes, Ms. Kinsey, we are prepared to move forward with Mr. Nicely's testimony. And I will be handling that today. Just
Great.
for your staff's purposes, Mr. Nicely's slides that he will be referring to today are available at Solvang 167. And Mr. Nicely will, provide direction on which slides to go to, but just as a preview, he won't be looking at particularly every single slides. We might skip some.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And with that, I will administer the oath. Good afternoon, Mr. Nicely. If you go ahead, you can please raise your right hand. You anticipated where we're going. Mr. Nicely, do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
You may go ahead and proceed with your the summary of your written testimony. Thank you.
And if I may, Ms. Kinsey, I just want to put forward that Mr. Nicely's written testimony was submitted as Solvang Exhibit 5, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Nicely, who's our hydrologist and hydrogeology expert. Thank you. Mr. Nicely, please proceed.
Great. Thank you, Your Honor. Really appreciate the opportunity to summarize my testimony here for you. My name's Tim Nicely. I'm a California registered geologist and a certified hydrogeologist, also in California. I've been managing groundwater projects throughout Central California for 24 years so far, of which 8 have been with my current firm of GSI Water Solutions. We can go to the next slide, please, Mr. Wooldridge. Thank you. So I manage several groundwater projects within the Santa Ynez River Valley groundwater basin. I'll just call it the basin for shorthand here. With the which included the preparation of one of the basin's groundwater sustainability plans that have already been discussed today. I also collaborated with Stetson engineers in the development of GSPs for the other management areas in the basin, of which there are 3. I currently review well permit applications for new and replacement wells for consistency with their groundwater sustainability objectives for all 3 management areas within the basin. And then finally, I am familiar with the city's River Wells project. My firm has been working with the city since 2016 for technical assistance for the city's petition for change. We can go to slide 3, please. Thank you. So in today's summary, I'll summarize at a high level the main points of my testimony. These opinions shown here are some of the few words on my presentation. And they're focused narrowly on the hearing issues by analyzing the effects of pumping associated with the city's River Wells project on surface water flows in the Santa Ynez River, and also on beneficial users of that resource. So I'll focus on my opinions as follows. So first, I'm going to opine that water production in the city's upland wells is limited by the geology of that aquifer. Second, the certified final EIR hydrogeologic analysis is still relevant, even considering the current management conditions. The third is that the city's River Wells project will not cause significant effects on stream flow or the long-term water storage. Fourth, the River Wells project will not adversely impact surface flows as measured at the Alisal Bridge. And then fifth, the River Wells project's drawdown effects are localized. And then sixth, the shift to well site B shifts pumping to an area with more total storage, with less drawdown, and less potential interactions with surrounding wells. And then I'll end by summarizing that the River Wells project will not result in injury to other legal water users. We can go to slide 4, the next slide, please. Thank you. So by necessity, the city of Solvang has a diverse water portfolio, as we've already heard, that includes the river wells, but also includes water from the upland aquifer as well as external sources. Each of the sources listed on this slide are required because of the multiple sources that are needed because of limitations of each of them. So my first opinion is that water production by the city's upland wells is limited by the geology of the aquifer. The city derives a portion of its supply from the river out of necessity and an authentic need for an adequate water supply. So in the order shown here, the water sources include pumping from wells that divert water from the alluvial underflow of the Santa Ynez River, pumping of water from wells located in the Santa Ynez uplands, which is outside of the Santa Ynez River, and then limited deliveries of state water project water and water from ID1. Water that is pumped from the underflow, just needs to be said, of the Santa Ynez River is considered to be surface water for this purpose. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the location of the Santa Ynez River alluvium is shown in the center of the map in the darker color relative to the city's boundaries. So sites A and B, which are central to our discussion, are shown here also. To be clear, the river in this map flows from right to left, where site B is pretty small, but it's the leftmost, farther downstream area relative to site A, which is a little bit farther to the right. So due to the characteristics of the upland groundwater aquifer outside of the river, production from the city's upland wells are limited in both the quantity and quality of the water they are able to produce. Due to the boundaries of the city, production from the city's upland wells are limited to the single water-bearing geologic formation of the Cariaga sand. As has been discussed previously, production from these wells in the Cariaga sand has been challenging, the details of which are because those wells have a tendency to produce problematic quantities of sand along with the water, and they produce relatively low quality, especially with regard to hydrogen sulfide, which is the rotten egg odor common to wells completed in this formation. So the city's upland wells only have access to this Cariaga sand aquifer in the city of Solvang. These wells yield less water than either the Paso Robles formation, which is available to wells elsewhere in the basin, or the Santa Ynez River alluvium, which we're discussing today, and wells for which yield significantly more water than either of those two upland aquifers. So if we could if we go to slide 7, please. Great, thank you. So on another point, the certified final EIR, hydrogeologic analysis, is still relevant, even considering the current management conditions. The prior analysis for the certified EIR is relevant in 2 ways. So first, it's relevant because of the reduced scope of the project, though it remains similar to the original project. And secondly, because surface flow conditions and the management of the Santa Ynez River are similar to the current conditions in the management of the river. So on the subject of the reduced scope of the project, the hydrogeologic conclusions that were included in Stetson Technical Memorandum number 6 that were central to the 2014 certified EIR analysis, and they presented a conservative analysis of the original project's impacts. The EIR addendum built on the prior analysis, the differences of which are shown here on the right as a reduced project scope with fewer wells in Site B, with reduced maximum and long-term average pumping rates. Now, on the subject of the river's management, which isn't shown on any slide, so here we go. The prior analysis was conducted in accordance with the Water Rights Order 8918, after which the State Board issued the current water order for operation of the Cachuma project. However, the USBR is still required to release water to maintain the main stem in-stream flows in the Santa Ynez River at all times when steelhead trout are present to satisfy downstream water rights holders. And as has been said, to maintain natural groundwater recharge for the Santa Ynez River. The current water order added a requirement relative to 8918 for the so-called Term 18 plan, which requires a minimum flow as measured at the Alisal Bridge stream flow during wet years. So therefore, the San Ynez River continues to be managed according to the applicable water rights order, and releases continue to be conducted by the same mechanisms and to the same alluvial system in the San Ynez River as present in the prior certified EIR analysis. We could skip one and go to slide 9, please. Thank you. So my opinions that I number as opinions 3 through 6 presented in my testimony are interrelated. Now I'm going to talk about drawdown and its potential impacts on river flow. And then I'll compare the hydrogeology of sites A and B. I won't be providing a complete discussion of Stetson's technical memoranda, which were already prepared and for the certified EIR, because those are discussed at length in my testimony. Those technical memoranda just very generally analyzed sites A and B that are shown on this map as the red shapes. Site A was analyzed in the certified EIR, but ultimately was rejected. Site B on the left is located on the north bank of the San Ynez River. And just for reference, that's about 1.5 miles west or downstream of the Alisal Bridge in the middle of the map. Stetson's Tech Memo number 6 focuses solely on Site B, as does my own analysis and the focus of these opinions, since it's the relevant project. The city's Riverwall projects will not cause significant effects on the stream flow or long-term water storage. So my firm GSI determined in answer to a prior hearing issue that the Riverwells project will have less effect on river conditions than the original project analyzed in the certified FEIR, and will result in less drawdown than modeled from the proposed wells. While the prior analysis included mention of an assumption of a 1-to-1 reduction of surface flows due to the city's pumping, that was, as I said at least 2 times in my testimony, an oversimplification that was included to create a very conservative CEQA analysis of the Riverwells project. Under conservative assumptions of our analysis, the Riverwells project will only cause a slight reduction in surface flow downstream at the Lompoc Narrows. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So within Site B, shown here, I modeled 2 potential locations of pumping wells based on the 4 that were analyzed by Stetson, and predicted the extent of drawdown in the San Ynez River alluvium based on a refined TICE analysis, quite similar to the one that was used for the certified FEIR. The details of the TICE analysis are provided in my testimony, but briefly, the pumping rates were modeled in accordance with the addendum and included 1,107 acre-feet a year. And we can talk about pumping rates if we need to, for a period of 6 months. The results indicate that at a distance of 500 feet upstream, that is to the right on this map of well site B, drawdown in the subsurface would only be 1.7 feet after 6 months of continual pumping while there's no flow in the river. That's at the long-term average pumping rate. Now, the drawdown would be less than only 0.8 feet at a distance of 2,000 feet upstream of Site B. And notably, no drawdown would occur beyond 3,600 feet upstream of well Site B, and would not extend up to the Alisal Road Bridge, shown in the center of the map. That agrees with Stetson's analysis that was in the certified final EIR. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, to estimate the short-term effects of pumping at relatively higher pumping rates from the city's planned production wells, we used our same TICE model with the following differences. So the duration of pumping was reduced to 24 hours, and the pumping rate for the 2 wells was increased from the long-term average rate to a higher rate of 920 gallons per minute, which is shown as 2.05 cubic feet per second on the second column from the right, as shown here in the table from the addendum. So if we can move on to the next slide, slide 12, please. I guess that would be, there we go, great. So another related point is that the River Wells project will not adversely impact surface flows at the Alisal Bridge. The results of the higher pumping rate analysis indicate that after 24 hours of continuous pumping, no drawdown would occur outside of a radius of approximately 500 feet from pumping wells in Site B. So depending on the locations of those two wells within Site B, this 500-foot radius of influence may only extend outside of the Site B very slightly, which would greatly influence the pumping drawdown in the subsurface and then any surface flows of the San Ynez River. So Site B is downstream of Alisal Bridge, as I've said, and downstream of the target flow sites for the Kachuma project under the 2000 biological opinion. So the results of our analysis are in general agreement with the similar analysis that was conducted by another hydrogeologist in an adjacent area, which is nearer the Alisal Bridge. And that analysis analyzed pumping at a higher pumping rate than we're doing here, and in an area of relatively lower productivity. Near the bridge, the alluvium is narrower and thinner, and therefore would incur more drawdown. And that area was in closer proximity to the flowing channel of the San Ynez River. So the results of that analysis show that the pumping from Site B in our area is considered to be relatively conservative based on the analysis of the other site. So if we could skip a couple, please, and go to slide number 15. Thank you. So the REVISE project is a reduction or diminution of the project analyzed by Stetson. The project will not affect flow at the Alisal Bridge, only to a limited degree to the next downstream gauge at the Lompoc Narrows. This was confirmed by Stetson in the table the table that we'd already showed, and their technical memoranda number 6, which concluded that moving the city's new wells to Site B can, as they said, quote, completely mitigate the impacts of flows at Alisal Bridge, unquote. So that's shown by the, I think we're on the wrong slide. I'm sorry, we're supposed to be on slide 14. Thank you. So the complete mitigation of impacts to flows at Alisal Bridge are shown as the 52 circled in the lower right green ellipse, which show increased flows at the Alisal Bridge from the city's project when it was considered to be 2,400 acre-feet per year. And then they also show on that same large green ellipse a small volume of decreased flows at Lompoc Narrows as the negative 319 in the lower right corner. And that is considered to be minor relative to the overall flow volume and even relative to the city's proposed pumping when it was 2,400 acre-feet under those modeled scenarios. Our conservative analysis of surface flows estimated that the project would reduce flow by 0.7 to 1.8 cubic feet per second, while Stetson's analysis estimated that pumping at a greater pumping rate would reduce flows by a mere 0.4 CFS. That demonstrated how conservative our analysis was of surface flow. Okay, now we'll go to slide 15. Thanks. So the project effects are localized. So drawdown is greatest near a pumping well, as shown in this diagram. And the most significant drawdown is within 100 feet of a pumping well, by the shape of the blue lines shown here. Outside of that radius, the effect diminishes considerably. And the Hopkins analysis, which is shown here for the area near the Alisal Bridge, establishes that pumping a well for 24 hours had no discernible effects on a pool located beyond 400 feet from the pumping well, even if it's disconnected from surface flow. Our similar analysis for wells in Site B at a higher pumping rate used a similar model of 920 combined gallons per minute and showed that there would be no effect outside of 500 feet from the well. So depending on the final locations of those two within that 500-foot radius, that radius could extend only slightly outside of Site B. So let's go to slide 18, please, which is a map. Thank you. So I'm almost done here. So well site B, shifting pumping to well site B pumps to an area that has more total storage, less drawdown, and fewer potential interactions with wells. So compared to the upstream area at near Alisal Bridge and site A near in that area, this area has more total storage capacity. It is better able to accommodate the diversion from the city's new wells with less drawdown of the subsurface water, less potential depletion of stream flow in the immediate area of the pumping wells, and with lesser impacts to the surrounding existing wells. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. This map is of that area upstream of Alisal Bridge. And I just want to point out this shows the potential drawdown from that project, where the radius of influence is shown as the yellow and blue circles. The radius of influence here may overlap with the river, which is immediately adjacent in that area. However, shifting of pumping away from that area downstream to Site B has the effect of more evenly distributing the city's diversion along the river, and further reduces any effect on water storage within the river alluvium and surface water flows. So with that, if we could go to the slide 24, please. There's several here we're not going to use. Thank you. Okay, my final opinion is that this Riverwells project will not result in injury to other legal water users. By locating them here, it adds more distance between Solvang wells and other well fields upstream of Alisal Bridge, specifically from ID1 and the Alisal Guest Ranch. The characteristics of the alluvium in this area are wider and deeper, and therefore would be more hydrogeologically desirable. And together, these conditions would support less variability in the subsurface water levels, lesser degree of depletion of surface water, the city's pumping, and would eliminate effects of drawdown with Alisal Ranch and ID1 wells. And then furthermore, the protest dismissal agreement that's been touched on earlier would limit the city's diversion from wells that would be up near the bridge during low flow periods. Okay, great. And then I'll summarize my if you go to slide 3, and then I'll just summarize what I just said, if that's okay. Is that okay? We have time for that? Okay, thanks. So in summary, the project water production from the city's well is limited, and their need to use water from the river seems unavoidable. Number 2, the certified FEIR analysis is relevant, still relevant. The project won't cause significant effects on stream flow or long-term storage, won't cause surface water depletion at Alisal Bridge. The drawdown effects are localized. The use of Site B shifts pumping to a more hydrogeologically preferable area. And then finally, the project won't result in injury to other water users in the area. And with that, that ends my summary. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nicely. I would like to go ahead. I think I have 2 questions, and hopefully these will make sense. One, I just want, and I've read both your case in chief testimony as well as your rebuttal testimony, so I apologize if I get them, I may jump ahead a little bit, but I think I get to do that. I'll try not to, but the first question is about some of the assumptions, one assumption for your analysis. When you conducted your analysis, did you assume that in assessing impacts that the Bureau through the Kachuma project would make these releases of water that are for downstream water users that would help to replenish? Let me back up. So now you know where I'm going. So let me stop there and back up on the question. One is, my understanding, I believe from your analysis, was that there would be some additional impact to drawdown in the basin, which would increase the amount of water that the Kachuma project would then release under this, I think it's called the above narrows account or something to that effect. Is that a correct understanding?
The releases are made to replenish flow as measured at the Alisal Bridge, right? That there's 2 points of they're measured. One is at Highway 154, where it's not measured as regularly. There's no USGS stream flow gauge there, and the other is at the Alisal Bridge.
Those are for, it's, well, maybe they're both, but those are for fish. And if I'm asking the wrong person, someone can correct me on asking the right witness, but are there not also releases intended for downstream, and maybe the same water, but for downstream users, which the volume of those releases are keyed in part on this above narrows account, which I understand goes up and down. Does that fit your understanding, or I may be asking the wrong witness these questions?
Perhaps you are. The timing and the nature of the releases, I think I understand, although imperfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a great question, but I don't think the project changes any of those mechanisms or the way that they're measured. And
maybe this will come out on, this may come out on cross too. So
Disagree.
I may have a follow-up question on this. So let's leave this out here. I'll just put this out here as I'm thinking about one of my questions is going to be whether one of your assumptions in conducting this analysis about impacts to surface flows and drawdown, whether that presumed that the Kachuma project would release additional water in a sense to offset Solvang's pumping.
I see. So yeah, I could take a stab at that if this is the good time for that. Great. So currently, as discussed, I believe it was in one of the two, but I think it was in my testimony. The USBR currently makes releases in the summertime, and the reason why we chose the 6-month period, Your Honor, is because we see only a short period between the fall period of when the river may. We modeled a 6-month period, right, between when it may start to decline, and then the summer releases that happen when my colleague happens to go tubing and enjoy the releases, right? And then we see that in the water level response in a well that's discussed in several testimonies in the area that shows that is already continually buoyed or recharged for the order annually, and we can talk about that if you'd like. But I feel like I'm not answering the question directly, but I think
no,
I'm dancing around
you
it.
are, and
Okay.
I can always get back to it because I get to ask all the questions I want. So
Great.
maybe let's move on to the next question, which might be similarly, we have to come back to it because I'm not phrasing it properly. But based on your analyses that you conducted, are there times when there wouldn't be that pumping from Solvang's wells or possibly any other wells in the area wouldn't have an impact on surface flows because the groundwater elevation and the surface flows are disconnected, so that there's disconnection and there's no direct impact? Would you expect that to happen under certain conditions?
Yes, I would. In fact, I think that is the norm instead of the exception in this case. There are quite a few multiple converging lines of evidence that suggest that we're calling it subsurface water to avoid groundwater, since we're differentiating that. We're a little careful about that, just differentiating it from groundwater, right? So the subsurface water, or groundwater, if you will, is pretty continually below the riverbed elevation. And that's shown in a hydrograph that was provided as a CDFW exhibit. And therefore, because the subsurface water level is predominantly deeper than the bottom of the river, they are disconnected. So any decline of subsurface water level will drop the water level, but it won't necessarily pull water from the river directly, which is a very important distinction that I was prepared to go into at greater length when it's warranted. And I discussed that at length in my original, it's several places. It's in an earlier report, Solvang 21, where we talk about the estimated stream flow reduction being less than 1 to 1. And It's discussed in Stetson's Tech Memo 6 in several places, and I would be more than happy to go into those. And similarly, why assuming the one-to-one reduction, a phrase that comes up over and over, is an oversimplification and not appropriate at all.
Thank you, Mr. Nicely. I really appreciate that. And I may well want to follow up with you on some of that, whether it's now or in rebuttal. We have more chances. So that, but thank you. And for now, I'll go ahead and turn and see if anyone else would like to ask questions. I'll go in the same order. The parent district, do you have questions for Mr. Nicely?
None at this time. I think this issue is going to come up quite a bit in the rebuttal phase. I don't think I'll bog us down with it now.
That's why I did apologize for jumping ahead a little.
That's all right.
All right, ID number 1. Do you have questions at this time?
No, we don't.
Thank you. Ollie Saul Guest Ranch.
No question, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Bivens, CCRB, do you have questions for Mr. Nicely?
I do.
I thought you might.
Thanks, Ms.
Well,
Kenzie.
please go ahead.
All right, thanks, Mr. Nicely. I'd just like to pull up Mr. Nicely's written testimony, Solvang 5, please. And if we could go to page 5, paragraph 16. Now, that first sentence in paragraph 16, Mr. Nicely states the River Wells project will not result in injury to other illegal water users. Is that correct?
That is what I said. Yes.
All right. And let's pull up now exhibit CCRB 21, please, Mr. Woldridge. And if we could go to PDF page 4. And I am looking starting at line 16. Aha, there we go. And in CCRB 21, that first sentence in the paragraph that begins on line 16 states, in short, Mr. Nicely's testimony provides a hydrogeologic opinion on the Riverwell project's impacts on nearby wells, which is squarely within Mr. Nicely's expertise as a certified geologist and hydrogeologist. Do you agree with that statement, Mr. Nicely?
Which part of that statement? I'm sorry, I'm trying to rearrange my screens a little bit, so I'm a step behind you. I'll catch up, I promise.
Understood. That first sentence in the paragraph that begins on line 16 on the page that's shown on the screen.
Is my testimony about, that's shown on 16 to 18 accurate?
That first sentence, is that an accurate characterization of your testimony?
I'm not an attorney, but in the technical aspect of that, I believe it is, yeah.
Okay, very good. So when you opined in paragraph 16 that the River Wells project will not result in injury to other legal water users, the injury you were referring to was the River Wells project's impact on nearby wells, correct?
Correct. It was a local effects statement that was related to the other wells in the area. Correct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicely. Let's go back to Solvang 5, page, oh my goodness, 31. Yes, page 31, please. And then you've got there at line 4, Mr. Nicely, therefore the River Wells project will not cause injury to any illegal water user. And my question is your opinion about injury there any different from the opinion you expressed in the first sentence of paragraph 16?
No, perhaps I wasn't using the correct phrase, but I'll clarify if you don't mind. So my contention, my opinion that the Rivers Well project won't result in injury to any other water users is a groundwater related program, or as I call them, subsurface water, and that the drawdown incurred by the city's wells will not adversely affect any other users in the area from being able to pump water of significant quantities to satisfy their beneficial uses.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Nicely. Let's go now to PDF page 10, the same document, Solvang 5, paragraph 30. And actually, we can probably, I'll try to short circuit this a little bit. So your testimony generally discusses 6 different technical memoranda prepared by Stetson engineers, correct?
Yes,
And Stetson technical memorandum number 6 is the one that's most relevant to your testimony, correct?
that's right. Much of that is taken from another more complete document. This is a summary of that. The more complete discussion is in Solvang 20, which is a more complete review of those technical memoranda summarized here. Yep.
Very good. Let's have Solvang 74, please, Mr. Woldridge. And we could just scroll down. This is a yeah, right there. That's perfect. So this is a true and correct copy of the Stetson Technical Memorandum number 6 that you've described in your testimony.
It is 70 pages. Yep.
Yes, and you see that it's marked draft there at the top, right?
That is the only version that I know of in this format. Yes.
And then in the from line, it's just indicated as being from Stetson engineers. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you happen to know whether any specific individual prepared this memorandum?
You know, we've been discussing these with an engineer by the name of Mr. Curtis Lawler, who has been representing the conclusions of this, and we believe was involved with the preparation of this. I don't know whether he was the primary author or it was done by others, but he is an expert in this document and has been party to discussions about this and the conclusions, the applicability, the comparison of this to the current project and whatnot.
Okay, so we don't know exactly who from Stetson authored this document, but we know Curtis Lawler at least is knowledgeable about its contents, correct?
Intimately. I believe he is one of the authors of this document.
Okay, and Solvang hasn't offered anyone from Stetson Engineers as a witness in this hearing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you didn't conduct your own modeling analysis to verify the conclusions and opinions reached in this document, correct?
No, I did. And our analysis was conducted, modeled on their analysis to refine the project. And that's discussed at length in my testimony, Solvang Exhibit 5, and recreated theirs with the diminished project and a lot of the other parameters that were included in the addendum.
So you conducted your own model runs to evaluate the conclusions reached in this technical memorandum? Correct. Okay, did you submit the model into evidence as an exhibit?
The model is summarized, the discussion of which is summarized in my exhibit. The model was not suitable for transmittal as a single file, since it is a series of files. But all of its discussion, all of its portions, all of its elements are discussed in my exhibit. It starts on paragraph 64 of my exhibit on page 25.
Look at that. Paragraph 64. Okay. And so if you haven't submitted the model, let me ask you a question. Let's say Mr. Woldridge wanted to try to replicate your modeling analysis. How would he go about that?
Right. So the model, would you like me, is this appropriate time to describe how that would be done? Because it will take more than a couple breaths to do so.
Yeah, it sounds like it is. Let's go. Let's go.
I don't want to waste.
Thank you, Mr. Knightley. Let's go ahead.
Yeah. So the TICE analysis that we conducted was modeled after Stetson's analysis and is well documented in theirs for those hydrogeologists who are qualified and experienced with doing these analyses. The elements that are including first of all, the name of the model. It's a TICE analysis. and it includes what are called image wells. It must also include, by necessity, a Jacobs correction for unconfined conditions, and it must include aquifer parameters of transmissivity and storativity, and which are also documented in Stetson. The locations are documented, the pumping rates, they documented as well. Our pumping rates were well documented for the precise wells in the addendum, the locations of which were chosen as 2 wells that represent the 4 Stetson wells that they modeled. So with those elements and an understanding of the geology of the basin from familiarity with the hydrogeology here, the city's project, the releases of water, whether there's stream flow or not from the basin, from the Kachuma Reservoir, and those should provide a relevant, a hydrogeologist familiar with the area, who is familiar with the standard of care of this type of projects, all they need to conduct these analyses. That is buoyed, that is supported by my colleagues and I, who all are familiar with these, other hydrogeologists, as well as others who are working in the basin, who are all familiar with doing these types of analysis, not only in this area, but in this river environment. So it is well within the, I'm just pointing back to the standard of care for these types of projects, if you would.
And so you referred to some specific model files that you indicated were not appropriate or not able to be submitted as into evidence in this proceeding, correct?
That's right.
And you use those modeling files to conduct the analysis that you just described and summarized from paragraph 64 and so on from your testimony?
That's right.
Very good.
If it helps, we also weren't provided the files for the prior analysis, but we're able to recreate them from what Stetson provided by calibration. We were first able to, if I may, if it's okay, able to recreate what their analyses, from which we then changed the input parameters of pumping duration and rate and timing and releases, and we created the analysis that's presented and discussed here.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand. Stetson has a set of modeling files that they use to conduct their analysis, and they didn't provide you with those files, correct?
Correct.
So then you and presumably a team of people you work with then went off to recreate the model that Stetson used, correct?
Yes, if we would like to see it, there is an image from it, if it would help, but I don't think you're asking that on a slide that I did not use.
No, that's okay. That's
great.
That's not what I'm asking. So you recreated the model, and then with the recreated model, you conducted the analysis that you just described from your testimony, correct?
Correct.
But you did not submit that recreated model into evidence, correct?
Correct, because we didn't think it was either possible or frankly useful.
Okay, Ms. Kenzie, I'm done with this line of questioning. Let's put a pin in that for later.
Okay.
Okay, that was fascinating. So let's go to Solvang 5, PDF page 17, please. And I'm looking at paragraph 45. Okay, and starting at the end of line 13, you've written the alluvium is replenished annually by surface flows, including flows associated with water rights and fish flow releases, correct?
So what line are you on?
I'm looking at line 13 there, in paragraph 45, it starts there. The alluvium is replenished annually by including flows associated with water rights and fish flow releases. And that's your testimony, correct?
Correct.
And the alluvium is the, we'll call it, you'll probably correct me, but the hydrogeological formation from which the River Wells project will extract surface water flows, correct?
Yeah, you've got it.
Oh, good. Okay, great. It's always tough with you engineers because you're very precise people. All right. Let's see. And then starting on line 19, and the last starts on the last word of line 19, Mr. Nicely. You've written even though period between 2012 to 2018 has been characterized as near record drought, exhibit Solvang 115 table 3-16, when average rainfall was 5 inches below normal on average. Subsurface in these wells near site B remain relatively high in response to the continued releases in accordance with the operation of the Kachuma project under Water Order 2019-0148, correct?
Correct. That's what it says.
And the releases that you are the continued releases you're referring to there include both releases for fish and downstream water rights releases, correct?
Correct.
So let's go to, if you take a look at line 24, the same paragraph, you've written that the river mechanics and management have not materially changed relative to conditions presented in the certified FEIR. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Let's go to paragraph 46 on the next page, line 2. Line 2. Line 28 on page 17, and then continuing on. You've written that GSI prepared a memoranda entitled Review of San Ynez River Mechanics and Technical Memoranda associated with City of Solvang's Revised River Wells project. And that document was submitted as Solvang 20, right?
That's the one I referred to in one prior answer. Yep.
And then your testimony then goes on to characterize State Water Board Water Order 2019-148 as, quote, new relevant information that Solvang 20 took into account, correct?
That's true, but I'd like to know which line that is. Oh, there it is, line 3, right?
I believe it's line 3 continuing to line 4, yes. Took into account new relevant information, including the Water Board order. Okay. So well, strike that. Let's go to paragraph 47, line 26, please. And there you wrote that water releases from Kachuma Reservoir established under SWRCB Order 2019-0148, which was issued after the certified FEIR and the Stetson analysis, would further reduce the anticipated drawdown identified in the Stetson model results because such releases provide additional recharge to the underflow and river not accounted for in the Stetson Technical Memorandum number 6 modeling. Is that correct?
That's correct. And do you need any more context with that?
I don't think I do, but I'm gonna ask Mr. Wooldridge to pull up Solvang 20. And then we'll talk a little bit about Order 2019-148. And let's go to PDF page 9, please, Mr. Wooldridge. So if we look at the second full paragraph on that page, the first sentence reads, SWRCB Order 2019-0148 requires substantially more water to be released from Bradbury Dam during wet and above normal year types for the benefit of Steelhead. See Table 2 flows at pages 134 through 135. And you don't disagree with that characterization of the Water Board order, do you?
No, but I would also add that is one of the principal changes is listed right there between 2019 and 0148 from our analysis point of view, at least.
Yes, I see that. But you don't consider that you don't consider those substantially larger releases under 2019-148 to be a material change relative to the conditions presented in the certified FEIR?
I do not. The project is the same as the mechanics is a phrase that I've learned is used for this area. The mechanics haven't changed. The timing has changed, and that can be with additional releases, and that can easily be accounted for in the analysis. It actually makes the Stetson analysis even more conservative, and arguably makes that more conservative analysis as now that we have these additional releases.
Yeah, there are even fewer impacts to downstream wells because the Kachuma project is releasing more water, correct?
That's what I agree with you.
Okay. Let's see now. Let's go to actually actually we don't need to do that because we just covered it. Does Solvang 20 provide a modeling analysis of how the River Wells project might affect Kachuma project operations under Order 2019-0148 specifically?
No, it does not. It
And
wasn't
you're-
the point that was, I'm sorry, I'll just slightly more complete answer. That was not the point of this memorandum at all. So it was outside of the scope of this.
I'll totally understand. And you're not aware of any exhibit that Solvang submitted that models the effects of the River Wells project on Kachuma project operations under Order 2019-148, correct?
In a way, the analysis that we did is a diminution of Tech Memorandum number 6 that has two elements. One element is a drawdown analysis, and another is a more complete assessment with the Santinez River hydrologic model. So in a way, we validate that report, and we are comfortable that if its conclusions were that the project, the impacts were, to use a better word, acceptable, insignificant, I think is the better word, then the smaller project is likewise that has insignificant impacts. So in a way, but not directly, we did not do a complete analysis of flows on to the same degree that was done for that, because that was beyond the need. It didn't seem like that would be required to answer the question.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you. So let's have excuse me. CCRB 22 on the screen, please. There we go. And you see, Mr. Nicely, that this is a decision of the State of California State Water Resources Control Board entitled Decision 1486, correct?
I see that. Yes.
And I'd like to go to PDF page 8, please. And if we look at the second sentence in paragraph 12, and I'll just paraphrase, it states that typically the precipitation in the Santa Ynez River watershed occurs in flash floods. Do you disagree with that characterization of the precipitation in the Santa Ynez River watershed?
While I haven't reviewed this document, I do agree with what you said, that our climate is subject to long periods of drought, followed by short, intense periods of water supply excess, or as this calls it, flash floods. That's been known, and it's been known for a long, long time.
Okay, and then if we could scroll down just a hair there, Mr. Wooldridge. There's a sentence that reads, and I'll try to paraphrase this. During a flash flood, most of the water flowing in a stream channel will not have the opportunity to move from surface flow into the underflow or into adjacent groundwater basins because of the slower rate of movement of water into and through alluvial gravels. Is that a fair statement in your opinion as a hydrogeologist, Mr. Nicely?
Yeah, stated another way. Yes, I agree, to answer your question directly. And stated another way, most of the water leaves by surface flow before it can go into the grid. Recharge.
Yeah. And then the following sentence after that one, a little further down, if Mr. Woldridge could scroll down just a hair, that's perfect. Reads, if, on the other hand, these large flows are captured in an upstream reservoir and then released at a slower rate, the quantity of water that will move into the underflow or adjacent groundwater basins will be proportionally much greater than without such regulation. Do you agree with that statement, Mr. Nicely?
Yes, wholeheartedly.
Okay, excellent. Let's go back to Exhibit Solvang 74, please. And if we could scroll to PDF page 3, please, Mr. Woldridge. And I'm looking here at table 1, row GW4. And then do you see where it says SWRCB EIR Alt 3C with Solvang pumping 1053 AFY paren baseline?
I do.
And so the certified FER also uses diversions of 1,053 acre feet per year in an instantaneous withdrawal rate of 1.85 CFS as its baseline, correct?
I don't see the 1.85 CFS on this table, and I don't have that in memory. But I do see the 1053.
Okay, fair enough. Let's go back to, and you'd agree that the certified FER for its baseline uses diversions of 1053 AFY, correct?
Groundwater modeling scenario number 4 on that second line from the bottom. Yes.
That's the baseline. Okay, very good. Let's go back to Solvang 5, PDF page 10. I'm looking at, there it is, paragraph 28, and I'm going to start on line 6. So your testimony there states that the Riverwell project proposes to limit the city's diversion to 1,368 AFY with a maximum instantaneous pumping rate of 2.84 CFS. Does that statement accurately describe the city's proposed diversions under the Riverwells project?
Yeah, that number comes from the addendum, from the table that I showed briefly in my presentation.
Okay, so when compared to the baseline used in the certified FER, the Riverwells project would allow diversions under permit 15878 to increase by approximately 300 acre feet per year compared to the baseline. Is that right?
The EIR did not consider the conclusions of the baseline, but instead the analysis was compared to the site B. Recall that I said that the site A was not the final conclusion of the certified FEIR, but instead what was shown on your prior slide as GW5, which is a pumping of 2,400 acre feet per year from, it said D/S, which means downstream. That referred to site B. That is now considered what the project was approved as, and is the baseline against which our analysis is based. So a more appropriate comparison would be from the table 2.03 annual operations plan in the addendum, which is Solvang -19, which shows a average pumping rate of 1107 or 1,107 acre feet per year. Maximum monthly diversion so 1107 compared to 4,500 acre feet a year. We believe that is a more appropriate comparison of those volumes, since that was 4,500 acre feet a year. I see you looking a little confused. 4,500 acre feet a year was the volume that was the final plan for the certified FEIR, and really is the baseline again for this revised Riverwells project.
So it's let me just make sure I understand your testimony. Your testimony is that the appropriate baseline against which the Riverwells project should be compared is not 1,053 acre feet per year, but 4,500 acre feet per year?
That's correct.
And to your knowledge, has Solvang ever diverted 4,500 acre feet per year under permit 15878?
No, I think we've established that earlier this morning.
I think so too. All right, let's.
I would, may I? I'm sorry, may I say one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind. So relative to volumes, I'd be remiss if I wouldn't say that the city's long-term average pumping rate that they plan to pump is a lower rate of 650 acre feet per year, which is the long-term average, and that is also in the addendum of Solvang-19. And that's an even lower number. So that value, which is also in the addendum in the revised project description, is a mere 27% of that 4,500 acre feet that was modeled and approved in the certified final EIR.
Interesting.
We're modeling a higher pumping rate to determine effects, but the long-term average pumping rate is significantly lower. That would be on, just for future reference, PDF page 18 of Solvang-19, which is the Solvang EIR addendum 2022.
But of course, if the Riverwells project is approved by the State Water Board, pumping could go as high as 1,368 acre feet per year, correct?
It could in years, and it's described in the project description. The long-term average will be lower, which is due to the uncertainty of the other water supplies that force the city into the water supply portfolio that they need because of the uncertainty of all of them.
Okay. Let me ask you another question, Mr. Nicely. If Solvang were to divert 1,368 acre feet in a critically dry year, that would tend to have a greater effect on groundwater levels or water levels in the alluvium compared to the same amount of diversion in a wetter year, correct?
That question can't be answered with a simple yes or no. And the reason is if I may.
Let me ask you. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bivens. If the river is not flowing in these critical dry years, then pumping water from the subsurface cannot have any effect on river flow. So that's why our analysis, I think that the norm is that the subsurface water level is below the riverbed elevation in this area. Therefore, if that's the case, then it can't have an effect on river flow.
Yeah, my question was a little bit different, Mr.
Okay.
Nice. So and I'll try to rephrase it so that we make sure we're speaking the same language here. If Solvang were to divert 1,368 acre feet in a critically dry year, that would tend to have a greater effect on subsurface water levels than a diversion of the same amount in a wet year, correct?
Those are the values that we presented in our figure 4, and I presented in my summary. Yes.
Okay, good. We are on the same page, I
Wonderful.
think. And of course, you talked about the 650 acre foot per year long-term average diversions. All of the things being equal, a 1,368 acre foot diversion would tend to have a greater effect on subsurface water levels than a diversion of, say, 200 acre feet. Is that right?
Absolutely, that's how it works, yes.
Okay, excellent. So the use of a long-term average can mask the effect of diversions at the highest permitted level, correct?
I'm sorry, could you say that another way? I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I'll move on from that. So Mr. Nicely, regardless of whether the baseline that was used in the addendum was 4,500 acre feet per year or 1,053 acre feet per year, you would agree with me that if this change petition is granted, Solvang would be able to withdraw approximately 300 more acre feet than the 1,053 acre foot per year number, correct?
300 is based on which two numbers? The 13?
Well, let's go back to Solvang 74. Let's go back to GW4, that baseline number of 1,053 acre feet per year. That's approximately 300 acre feet per year less than Solvang would be able to divert from the underflow if its change petition is granted. Is that right?
That number is higher. Yeah. I
Okay.
think that's what you're asking. Yeah.
Yep, that's it. Did you analyze whether or when water from the unregulated flow of the San Ynez River would be available to supply Solvang's diversions under permit 15878?
Can you define what you mean by unregulated flow?
By unregulated flow, I mean the flow of the San Ynez River in the absence of the Kachuma project.
No, that was not part of it because the Kachuma project exists.
Yeah, so you didn't conduct that type of analysis.
No, that was outside of the scope of the hearing questions.
Okay, we may have to agree to disagree about that, but I appreciate your.
Well, from a technical point of view, it's outside of my analysis of the hearing order questions.
Yes. Okay, understood. Thank you. So let's go to Solvang 19, please. And this is the January 2022 addendum to the Water System Master Plan Update FEIR, correct?
Correct.
You're familiar with this document?
Yeah, I included PDF page 19 in my summary.
Yes. So let's go to PDF page 41, please. And the very first sentence reads, average dewatered groundwater storage in the above Narrows aquifer would increase with implementation of the approved project. Do you agree with that statement?
I do. That is directly out of Stetson's Tech Memo number 6, which shows the anticipated water level changes in the various areas that show that the most significant change would occur in the Sentinez subbasin. So those are two of the tables which I had in my presentation, which I did not have time to use to answer your question.
And then the next sentence indicates that surface water flows would increase during the summer and early fall months as a result of additional water right releases. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't disagree that the River Wells project, if approved, would result in increased water rights releases from the Kachuma project, correct?
I believe that was quantified to support the answer yes to your question. It was quantified as an additional release of don't want to misremember the number that I have in mind. So let me look it up real quick.
Sure. think it might have been 184,
That's the number I had in mind as well. Yeah,
184 acre feet per year of additional water rights releases.
correct. That's the number I had in mind. I don't find that number in my testimony, so I wonder if it was in my rebuttal.
It was definitely in your testimony, but I think I've got what I need. We can move on to, I think, what I think is my last question, which is, you would agree that water released to the San Ynez River from Bradbury Dam for a downstream water rights release can't be diverted through the Tecolote Tunnel for use by the Kachuma Project member units on the south coast, right?
I think you're asking whether the water can go both ways at the same time, but I must be misunderstanding your question.
No, that's my question. If water is released from Bradbury Dam to the San Ynez River main stem, can it be used by the Kachuma Project member units on the south coast?
That question seems to answer itself, but water can't go two ways, right?
So the answer is no. If it's released to the main stem, the south coast member units can't use that water.
The answer is no. You asked the question. Correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Nicely. I have no further questions for Mr. Nicely.
Thank you, Mr. Bivens.
All right, thank you. We can take down the, thanks, appreciate it. I think for at least Mr. Nicely's sake, we'll take a brief break. I know we're getting towards the end of our day and I do want to try to continue, but let's go for at least, let's do just 5 minutes and come back at 4 p.m. and we'll pick up where we left off. Thanks. All right, it's 4:01, so once we get everyone back online here, we'll pick up again. I know it was a very short break, so. All right, I see we have Mr. Nicely, and I will turn, I believe we'd concluded with CCRB, and so I will turn to CDFW. Ms. Germanario, if you're on, do you have any questions for Mr. Nicely?
Ms. Kenzie, actually, I do. This is Stephen Piccini with CDFW. Hi.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Piccini.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Nicely. Stephen
Hello.
Piccini with CDFW. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on a line of questioning that Mr. Bivens was presenting just now. Simple question. He mentioned regulated releases. Do you understand what he meant by
I'm
that?
sorry to interrupt. I just popped into the meeting and I feel like I missed something. We started before I was where I.
I'm sorry, Ms. O'Sullivan. I thought I saw your. I truly apologize. I saw Mr. Metz on the line, and I think I wasn't. Anyway, I apologize.
We could just back up to the beginning.
We've had introductions, and you came in on the very first. What I think is correct to say, the very first question after we said hello. So that is where we are.
Thank you. Just want to make sure.
Mr. Piccini, you please go ahead. And if you would re-ask the question, that would be great. Thank you.
Be happy to. I was just following up with a line of questioning by Mr. Bivens. He mentioned regulated releases. Do you understand what he meant by that, Mr. Nicely?
I believe I do. If there is some subtlety about how that isn't the water rights and fish releases that we modeled, then I might have missed it, but
that is correct. That's how I would use that term for this question. It's a simple question. If you don't have those regulated releases, that water won't be available to replenish surface flow or quote unquote refill underflow. Is that correct?
That's the way I understand it, yes.
And therefore, if those regulated releases were to change in some manner up or down, that would affect both those factors, stream replenishment and underflow.
Yeah, this is a highly managed river, and the recharge depends on those regulated releases.
Thank you. And you stated today and also in your direct testimony that you're familiar with the River Wells project, correct?
Correct.
And as part of the project, Solvang is requesting the state board to amend permit 15878, correct?
Correct.
And is one of those amendments that is being proposed is to extend the reach of diversion 8,060 feet downstream from Alisol Bridge, correct?
The number sounds familiar, but I would refer to the actual order. It is downstream of the Alisol Bridge.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And you also stated today in your testimony that the subsurface water in the Santa Ynez River alluvium in this reach is underflow, correct?
I did not say the word underflow, I think, today.
If I said subsurface water, would that be accurate?
I believe it is underflow, but I don't think I used the term. So that's why we used subsurface flow.
Okay.
For a variety of reasons, yeah.
Okay. I might say underflow in my questions, and what I mean by that is subsurface flows. You use that term. Is that something you can?
That's fine. I got you. I'll follow along.
Sounds
yes.
Great. Mr. Woldridge, can you bring up Solvang 18 really quickly? Thank you. Mr. Nessie, you're familiar with this figure, correct?
I am.
And do the green dots in the area marked Site B represent the proposed well locations under the River Wells project?
Sorry for cutting you off. They represent two potential locations of the River Wells project, which were derived as 2 of the 4 wells that were included in Stetson's Tech Memo 6 for the certified final EIR.
Okay, thank you. And this is the most recent figure that shows those potential locations for those 2 wells, correct?
Correct.
Okay. To your knowledge, are the boundaries of the Site B area depicted by that outer red line polygon, are those boundaries exact boundaries?
I don't know the answer to that, but they appear to be well defined. I don't know if they've been surveyed, but I do believe there are described legal lines.
Okay.
They're close here, close enough for the sake of this analysis.
Okay, and I guess what I'm asking is exact compared to approximate. In other words, my question is, to your knowledge, could those boundaries change?
I don't believe they will change, but that's really outside of my area of expertise.
Understood.
The Site B area has been given to me as part of the project description. I do not believe they'll change, but I could be wrong.
You're not sure one way or another.
I did not. I'm not sure I said that. I strongly believe that they are set, and they're part of the project description, but I haven't tested that.
Okay, thank you. And would you agree that the locations for those two wells, as depicted by those green dots, those are approximate locations, correct?
That's right.
They could change. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. And although those two well sites are approximate locations, was it your testimony that under any circumstances, they will be at least 150 feet north of the high water mark of the San Ynez River?
Yeah, that's the way the addendum describes them in the project description.
And in your rebuttal testimony, Solvang 171, is it correct that you stated the distances of the two wells from the river are, quote, likely greater than 200 feet? And, quote, as presented on Solvang 18, the distance may be as great as 1,800 feet in portions of Site B, and the locations of the two wells could be between 800 and 1,100 feet from the river.
Ms. Kenzie, if I could just interrupt at this time, I just want to make sure that we don't stray too far into rebuttal testimony, as Mr. Nicely is testifying on his direct testimony at this time, and there will be further opportunity to question him about his rebuttal testimony at that phase.
The only reason I'm asking that, and this is the only time I'm going to touch on his rebuttal testimony, is just to draw the comparison between the distance that he stated in his direct testimony compared to the distances he described in his rebuttal testimony.
I'm going to allow it here. I understand the objection, Ms. O'Sullivan. And it's really just objection based on keeping ourselves sorted out because we have these separate, because it is fair game to cross-examine on outside of the scope of the direct testimony. But I think this is important to sort this out. So go ahead. You may have to ask the question again. It was a complicated question, so I don't know if you want to break that down, Mr. Puccini. That might help.
I'll try to. It's just that he gives a lot of different distances in the rebuttal. Right. But the way I would rephrase it is, we know based on your answer that in your direct testimony, you said that the wells will be at least 150 feet north of the high water mark of the San Ynez River, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But then in your rebuttal testimony, you gave different distances, including would be likely greater than 200 feet, okay, compared to 150. Is that correct?
That's correct. I can help explain if it would help, but
I'm just asking for verification on that. And then you also stated that the distance could be as great as 1,800 feet in portions of Site B, correct?
Correct.
And then you also said that the location could be between 800 and 1,100 feet from the river. Is that correct?
Correct.
So is it fair to say that as you sit here today, you don't know exactly where those two wells will be located, but they could be really in any of those distances that you described?
Well, the locations are not known. What we do know is that the locations of the wells will be 150 feet away from the active stream channel. As drawn, they meet that criteria. They meet the test that whether they were included in the same locations as the prior certified FEIR. And those locations as drawn happen to be drawn considerably farther from the active river channel, as is shown on the map you have on the screen. The distances as drawn are much greater than 150 feet.
Okay, thank you. And you also stated in your testimony that the two site B wells will be at least 1,000 feet apart. Is that correct?
Yes, and that matches what you have on figure 4 as drawn.
Okay. Is it correct that nowhere in the amended change petition by Solvang they include any of these distances?
I believe the distances are indeed shown in the addendum, project description. In fact, they.
Just to interrupt, I
Did I
wasn't
miss
asking
the
about.
question?
I was asking about the amended change petition. Do you know what the amended change petition says about the relative location of the two wells in site B?
Well, I don't know the wording. I know that this is consistent with that. We checked it at some point.
Okay, we can move on. Thank you. Your testimony is that you conducted a drawdown analysis using image wells, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Does your analysis rely on the location of the two site B wells relative to the distance to the underflow and boundary of the San Ynez River?
The locate, does it rely on the, can you
I'll
say that
repeat
one
it.
more time?
Yeah. Does your analysis rely on the location of the two site B wells relative to the distance to the underflow and boundary of the San Ynez River?
Yeah, the location of the wells relative to the boundary of the San Ynez River alluvium is part of the analysis, such that changing them would change the results of the analysis.
Okay, thank you. And to determine what the drawdown is going to be when the two wells in site B are located and constructed, will the transmissivity and storativity values need to be determined for each well?
No. The transmissivity values are well confined based on the hydrogeologic analyses of the area.
But you use the values, or let me ask you this, did you use the values for transmissivity and storativity from table 2 in the 2012 Hopkins report?
The values in the 2012 Hopkins report informed our use of the values. However, the values used were more appropriately chosen based on the Stetson report that were included in the certified final EIR for this area. The Hopkins report for 2012 referred to another area. We used a value that was appropriate for this area, and they happen to be similar.
And so your testimony is just that the technical memorandum number 6 by Stetson identified those transmissivity and storativity values, and those are the ones that you used as part of your refined analysis?
Correct. The storativity and transmissivity were from Stetson. Okay.
So these values were not taken from the aquifer above Alisal Bridge, correct?
No, that wouldn't be appropriate. It's the wrong location.
Okay. Does using these values at site B, meaning transmissivity and storativity, give you only a rough estimate of what the drawdown would be for each of those wells at site B?
No, the use of those values is within the standard of care for this area and provides a defensible analysis for hydrogeologic investigations in this environment, in the long linear alluvial environment, as we conducted it with the use of image wells, the Tice analysis, and the Jacobs correction. They give a reasonable estimate that's within the standard of care for hydrogeologists doing work on this type of project.
To get a more accurate estimate, would a pump test for each well need to be conducted? Let me rephrase the question. You just said that the values you used are within the standard of care. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're implying is that, yes, it is an estimate, albeit in the standard of care. And so what I'm asking is, if you wanted yet a more accurate estimate, presumably still within the standard of care, would a pump test be appropriate?
Well, I contend that a pumping test wouldn't provide an estimate. It would provide you an empirical value after you have installed the wells. And therefore it would happen at a much later time after the wells have already been installed and they've been, so that wouldn't be an estimate at all. It would be an empirical direct measurement.
And so when you say empirical measurement or empirical value, do you mean as to storativity and transmissivity?
No, you about as to the drawdown. The transmissivity and storativity, therefore, would be moot as they are used to estimate drawdown at a distance. While the
Okay.
pumping well can provide transmissivity and storativity if conducted correctly, that would only be used as a surrogate to determine what the drawdown is at a distance. If you're doing a pumping test, you presumably would have other wells to measure and would be able to empirically measure what the drawdown would be at a distance, and the use of transmissivity and storativity wouldn't be needed. So at this point, the use of the standard of care, transmissivity and storativity, and pumping rate and duration are the way to do the estimate before the wells are installed.
Before the wells are installed. So storativity and transmissivity are values you use before the wells are installed to help you determine drawdown. But if you wanted to get a more accurate picture of drawdown, you could do that using a pump test after the wells are installed, correct?
You can use the pumping test to tell you what the transmissivity and storativity are, indeed.
Thank you. In your testimony is that GSI, and I think you said, including yourself, you refined the drawdown analysis after reviewing and validating the analysis conducted by Stetson in his technical memorandum number 6, correct?
Correct.
And also after reviewing the Hopkins report, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I would add that they also included our modeling of the area. Well, I don't know if this is in my testimony. I can't mention that. Pardon me. Strike that.
I'm not going to ask that to be stricken, so that's fine by me.
Okay.
And I might, by the way, as I talk about the tech memo, refer to it as TM number 6 just for brevity. But what I mean by that is the Stetson tech memo number 6. Thank you. And the refined analysis was both for long-term pumping and short-term pumping scenarios, correct, as you testified?
Right, correct.
Okay. And it was also, the refined analysis for both these pumping scenarios was performed using the same Tice method that Stetson and Hopkins used, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And also the refined drawdown analysis for both the long-term and short-term pumping scenarios simulated 2 wells at the locations in Site B as depicted in Solvang 18, correct?
Solvang 18 is the figure we're looking at, yes.
Okay. Is it your testimony that the refined analysis use image wells, and I'm just going to quote from your direct testimony at page 25, lines 24 through 26, quote, represent the northern and southern boundaries of the river?
Correct.
Okay. And this is just a point of clarification, and if you need to look at Solvang 5, we can bring it up, but at lines 24 through 26 on page 25, by river, do you mean river underflow?
This is line 24 and 25?
24 through 26 on page 25.
I'll read them just so that I can make sure I understand them,
Sure.
as well as for the case of for everyone else's sake.
Yeah.
The analysis included the use of image wells to represent the northern and southern boundaries of the river.
Right.
Then it goes on. But by that, I meant the northern and southern boundaries of the Sentinez River alluvium as shown on figure 4.
Thank you.
As
That's
the darker area.
Okay, thank you. Didn't mean to cut you off. That was I was asking. So I think what we're talking about is the river underflow, according to your testimony. And then in your testimony, you also state that any surface flows that do occur in the river after the late fall or early winter months provides recharge to the river flow and to the alluvial aquifer. Is that consistent? Is that what your testimony was?
Correct.
Okay. And is that refilling as you describe it, the increase in the rate of natural downward seepage from the surface flow to the subsurface water that you mentioned in your testimony?
Increase in the rate of subsurface flow. That is a, I don't know if increase is the right word. It is the commencement.
Let me just rephrase the question. So,
okay.
Is that refilling the increase in the rate of natural downward seepage from surface water to subsurface water that you mentioned in your testimony?
I don't, can you direct me to where that I said that?
Yeah, let's
go
go
to
to
context. That'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
No problem. Page 21 of your testimony, lines 20 through 22, I believe is where it states that.
So this is discussing something else. This is not discussing, this is discussing the assumption of one-to-one river reduction. Right?
Okay,
This paragraph starts talking about a conservatively assumed pumping that would remove surface water flow at a one-to-one ratio.
okay.
So this slightly different point, but it might still be a valid question. So line
Yeah,
21
so
again.
yeah, go to lines 20 through 22 if you don't mind. And the sentence is rather the drawdown caused by subsurface water pumping may increase the rate of natural downward seepage from surface water to subsurface water. That's your testimony, correct?
Well, that's the sentence that we are looking at on screen. Yeah. And
All right. And under this scenario, there would be a reduction in surface flow. Is that true?
under what scenario?
The scenario we just mentioned where the system is being refilled.
That would be a reduction of surface flow?
There would be a reduction. Yeah, what I'm trying to understand is the source of the refilling. Okay. There could be a reduction in surface flow under that circumstance, correct?
When the river is recharging the subsurface, even when disconnected, it is percolating out of the river flow down into the subsurface and is a source of recharge. Yes.
Thank you. And if there is no refilling, would there be a loss of storage? In which case the level of underflow would drop?
If there's no refilling, there is also recharge from other sources. So the refilling is the principal method of recharge from the surface. Obviously, it's a river. The river flows, the river recharges, but there are other sources of recharge to the river, including underflow that happens without regard to the surface flow.
Would you be able to identify those other sources of recharge?
Sure. Is that appropriate?
Please.
Great. So the other sources of recharge are well documented in this area, and they include the underflow through that's water that moves laterally in the wet sands and gravels, right from right to left on my map. We assume it's on the order of 1,000. Is it 1,800 acre feet per year? That's from our groundwater sustainability plan modeling. There's also recharge that happens from tributary inflow. Those are not related to the Kachuma project. And there is recharge that happens from the upland aquifer in this area that is not present in the area of the Alisal Bridge. That is from the Buellton aquifer that provides a volume of flow as well. And then finally, there are other sources of inflow from the likes of wastewater treatment plants.
You also stated in your testimony that some of the recharge occurs at Site B from underflow from the underlying Paso Robles Formation and Cariaga Sand on the north side of the San Ynez River, correct?
Correct.
Would you describe those that recharge as incidental or insignificant, or can you quantify it in some way?
So that was quantified in the Central Management Area Groundwater Sustainability Plan and was quantified as being on the order of 690 acre feet per year. And for point of reference, I don't know what the exhibit number was, but I saw that the entire groundwater sustainability plan was included as an exhibit. It wasn't one of our exhibits, but it was included as an exhibit that I saw on screen. And therefore, that includes the reference to that value of 690 acre feet a year that comes in from that upland aquifer.
Thank you. Does the pumping of the two Site B wells cause an increase over the baseline condition in the volume of outflow from the San Ynez River to the San Ynez River underflow aquifer? And I can restate that question if you'd like.
If you would, that'd be great. I think I understand it, but I don't want to answer a question that you're not asking.
No problem.
Thanks.
My question was, does the pumping of the two Site B wells cause an increase over the baseline condition in the volume of outflow from the San Ynez River to the river underflow aquifer.
I'm gonna step in and object here. It's sort of incomplete hypothetical. It's not clear what's meant by baseline, and I think it would lead to confusion for Mr. Nicely to answer that question as stated.
I'd like to ask Mr. Nicely if he understands the question before you rule on that objection.
Well, I'm not gonna, I would like clarification of baseline, and maybe your question, Mr. Pacini, is to get Mr. Nicely to talk about what he thinks the baseline is, or you can define it. I think either way, let's start with the first question, which is what baseline are we talking about?
I think I'm going to pass on that question.
Okay.
Thank you. Will the refilling you described in your testimony occur when there is water in the river, with or without pumping from the Site B wells?
Yes.
But the main source of refill would be surface water from the river. Do you agree with that?
I agree. It is the river, both in the surface and subsurface together, form the principal source of recharge.
And so going back to your previous statement, in terms of other sources of underflow recharge, it would include that plus the surface water. Is that correct?
That's right. The volume of surface water that travels through vastly exceeds the volume of the underflow volume that I provided.
Thank you. Is it your understanding that Solvang in its amended change petition doesn't specify that pumping is limited to individual 24-hour periods with full recovery in between?
The maximum diversion rate is provided, right? The city is usually limited, as was pointed out in a previous witness, to pumping for relatively limited periods due to the lack of storage in the city. So by having a lack of storage, the city operationally is often limited to the number of hours they're able to produce without having a place to put the water. And that limitation imputes a limited number of hours of pumping of those wells to the periods to satisfy the city's demands.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nicely. Is it your understanding that the amended change petition does not specify that pumping will occur only when the river is dry?
I think that was a double negative. I'm sorry.
Let me rephrase it.
Thank you.
Is it your understanding that the amended change petition doesn't specify that pumping only occurs when the river is dry?
I believe it can occur in Site B, whether it's dry or flowing.
Okay, so the question, I guess, and you might not know the answer if you're not super familiar with the change petition, but what I'm asking is if you know whether the amended change petition actually specifies that pumping by Solvang will only occur when the river is dry. In other words, the pumping could occur when the river is dry or when the river is not dry.
You know what? I'm not familiar with whether it is or isn't included in that change petition offhand.
That's fine. Thank you. So as we just went through a little bit ago, your testimony was that you validated the TM number 6 Tice image well drawdown analysis, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And was that basically just removing 2 of the 4 wells that Stetson used?
No, it was a removing of the wells and imputing on the model different pumping rates based on the new addendum, which decreased pumping rates, not from 4,500 acre feet a year, as I said earlier, but from a lower rate of 2,400 acre feet, which was the value I meant to say earlier for the prior question when I mentioned 4,500 acre feet, from 2,400 acre feet to an average of 1,107 acre feet a year. And then for the short-term analysis, for the pumping rate that's included for that analysis.
is it accurate to state that there really isn't any information on the subject outside of Stetson's technical memorandum 6?
What sort of information?
Well, in other words, did you stay within the confines of the information that was provided in TM6, or is there other information that you relied on in validating that?
No, we used that analysis. We also used our experience. If you're asking about other experience, it might be okay for me to bring in my other experience in the area.
I wasn't asking about your other experience. I was just asking if there was other information outside the memo that you relied on.
Well, that experience is some of the information that validated whether it's reasonable or not. Because
understood. Yeah.
But the only other thing that I did not mention is that we also changed the duration of the model to from the 2 years of no flow with no recharge to a lower 6 months to reflect the current management of the river.
Yes, I think I recall that from your previous testimony. Thank you.
Great.
And the total diversion in Solvang's amended petition, again, is 1368 acre feet per year. Is that correct?
That is combined from well 3 and site B. 1107 acre feet of that will occur from site B.
Right, and the difference from well 3, correct. Thank you. And the maximum diversion rate in the amended change petition combined is 2.84 CFS, correct?
2.84 CFS is the value on table 2. Is that correct? Let me check, please. Looking at the addendum onto the table that was in my presentation to make sure that's right. 2.83 CFS, correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you being careful with your answers. And then that amount is divided between well number 3 at 0.78 CFS and the 2 wells combined at 2.05 CFS. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is it true that the 1368 acre feet year could be diverted using only, well, let me see if I can look at this again. The total, it's not 1368. I'm trying to remember exactly what amount can be diverted. I think it's 1107 can be diverted. Those 2 wells. Can that total amount be diverted by only 1 well?
It's not. It doesn't seem to me hydrogeologically that's possible from the production rates of those wells.
Okay. Well, we would basically, it would be dependent on the production rates or the capacity of those wells, right?
Yeah, the estimated 2 well capacity is 920 gallons per minute, which is that 2.05 cubic feet per second.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. And the refined TICE image well drawdown analysis, it used a rate of 686 GPM for 6 months, correct?
The 686 is the same as the 1107 number you said. There's a lot of different, there's 3 different flow volumes, which complicate the discussion.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right, but your answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And your testimony is that refined drawdown analysis is based, as we just mentioned, on 6 months of pumping. That's annualized as 1107 acre feet per year, correct?
It is, yeah, it is half of the 1107 acre feet per year, annualized. If that's what you mean by annualized, then yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Was the total volume of your 6 months of pumping 1107 acre feet?
No.
Can you explain then what the difference is?
Sure. Since it was a 6-month period and they were limited by the maximum monthly diversion amounts on table 2.03 in the addendum for the annual operations plan, the analysis was pumping at that rate for half the time. So the pumping rate was the 1107 divided by 2.
Thank you. So is it fair to summarize or in summary to state that your long-term analysis used a constant pumping rate for 6 months and that total pump volume was less than the maximum in the amended change petition?
The period wasn't the entire year, so because it was less than 1107 because it wasn't the entire year. Correct.
Thank you. You also testified that when a well pumps, the drawdown from underflow increases closer to the well, correct?
Drawdown? It does, yes.
Okay. And so would you expect the drawdowns to increase if the Site B wells are pumped at the maximum allowed combined diversion rate of 920 GPM, and the continuous pumping duration was extended to extract the maximum of 1368?
The maximum monthly diversion amount of 1368 exceeds the 1107 annual pumping rate, and therefore it can't pump that rate long term or over the years. That's why we use the maximum for diversion rate of 1373 acre feet per year for a short period, because that would pump too much water in violation of their annual operations plan.
Okay. And TM number 6, Solvang, which is exhibit Solvang 74, it gives drawdowns north of the well field in table 19 and upstream or downstream of the well field in table 20. Is that correct?
It sounds correct. I just want to make sure that that is correct. It seems correct, and it's inconsequential whether the table numbers are correct, but yeah.
Thank you. But your Solvang 18 figure only gives upstream drawdowns, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then why did you only give the upstream portion of the drawdowns, unlike Stetson did in TM6?
Right. There were a lot of numbers, and it was a complicated analysis, and therefore we provided the numbers that we thought were relevant to show that the pumping from Tech Memo 6 was valid, and that the pumping would not affect the flow at the Alisol Bridge. And that's why we focused on that, to simplify the analysis. It's not that we didn't have those values in our model. We just didn't see that it was useful to provide yet another table, complicated table.
Thank you. Would the pumping at the two proposed Site B wells also produce drawdown to the north and downstream of the wells?
Yes.
Okay. And would you expect the downstream drawdowns to be equal to the upstream drawdowns as Stetson found, or would they be different?
No, they would be different.
Okay. Do you know why? And then secondly, by how much?
We do know why, and we can talk about by how much. The nature of the Santa Ynez River and the use of the image wells has the effect of modeling more drawdown in the north-south direction because they're relatively closer to the edges of the basin. Pumping recharge from the edges of the basin could increase drawdown in those areas. So that's why we have the two tables in Stetson's TM6 to show that the difference of drawdown in the two different directions.
Okay, and then can you quantify how much the difference would be?
No, we didn't present it that way.
Okay.
For our analysis.
Okay, sort of similar question. Would you expect the drawdowns north of the wells to be equal to the upstream drawdown or greater?
As I suggested, the drawdown in the north-south direction would be somewhat greater than the drawdown in the what I was calling the upstream or downstream direction, as shown in the figure 4 you were showing earlier.
Okay. And then in Solvang 18, the distances listed for each drawdown, those are taken from the upstream boundary of Site B, correct?
The distances are from the upstream boundary at the river.
Okay.
They're 500 feet upstream of the most upstream portion of the site, which we thought was a conservative way to measure the distances. However, they're described, the drawdowns as shown on figure 4 that you had up earlier are correct at those locations.
Okay, and so the distances from the two proposed Site B wells to the upstream drawdown lines are greater than the distances listed in Solvang 18, correct?
Yeah, for simplicity, they're not measured from the well.
Okay.
They're measured as I just described.
Okay. Is the
Either
drawdown-
way, I'm sorry,
Yes.
but either way, the drawdown does not reach up to the Alisal Road Bridge.
I remember that in your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the drawdown caused by pumping subsurface water?
Yes,
Okay. And your refined drawdown analysis assumed the river was dry during the 6 months of pumping, correct?
correct.
Okay. And did you assume also that the river would have surface water after being dry for 6 months, or can it be dry for longer?
We don't expect it based on the current management to be dry for longer, which is why we've limited the analysis to the 6-month period. And therefore, I don't know if the answer to that question. The answer to that question must be that it wasn't included in the model because we didn't think that matched the management of the river and the current release schedule as described.
Would I be correct that that implies that the late fall winter flows refill what's being pumped out?
They do, yeah. And that's shown on the hydrograph that is included as CDFW. One of the hydrograph of the well in that area that is shown.
Okay. And is the occurrence of the surface water in the river, is that what prevented you from using a pumping duration longer than 6 months in your refined drawdown analysis?
That's right. We thought 6 months was a maximum amount of time when the river would be in that condition, contrary to the way that the management of the river was at the time of the prior water order when the certified EIR was addressed.
Okay. And then is the closest distance from the two proposed site B wells to the river less than the distance to the 500 feet from the upstream boundary line?
I would need to look at that on the image of the figure 4. Answer that question.
Solvang 18. Could you pull that up, Mr. Woodward?
That's Solvang 18.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So depends on from where we measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it does from either of the green dots to the river appears to be slightly closer than the distance to the first line.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Kenzie, I just want to do a time check really quickly because I think NIMS might have a couple of questions and I don't want to take up the entire amount of time to allow for that.
I have us at 4:44. So that would be roughly 41 minutes in, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Not too many more questions. If the drawdown increases closer to the well, should the long-term drawdowns at the river right adjacent to Site B be greater than the upstream drawdowns given in Solvang 18?
If the drawdown increases near the well,
yes,
would they be greater? In
yeah,
which direction?
I'll rephrase the question. If the drawdown increases, no problem. If the drawdown increases closer to the well, should the long-term drawdowns at the river right adjacent to Site B be greater than the upstream drawdowns given in Solvang 18?
Well, the premise is a question for me. I'm not sure why they would be greater. And that we modeled a very conservative analysis for as great as we thought it would be, and so but if they were greater at one place, they would be greater elsewhere. But I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm sorry to say.
Okay, but I guess I'm asking if yes, would it be because the distance is less?
If the drawdown is greater at the well, for whatever reason, hypothetically, the drawdown would be greater elsewhere.
Okay. And then if the drawdown at 500 feet from the upstream boundary line after 6 months of pumping at Site B wells is 1.7 feet, which I think you testified to, will that drawdown beneath the river adjacent to Site B during this period of no river flow be greater than 1.7 feet?
It would be somewhat greater by the river where there's no flow.
Okay.
And that agrees strongly with Stetson's TM6, where they have tables of the estimated flow at much greater rates on their table 14 and 15 that show between 1 and 2 feet of drawdown in the entire sub area based on a larger project.
Okay. Does this have any relationship with the 24-hour pumping? In other words, the pumping time for 24 hours, less than 6 months?
Those two analyses were mutually exclusive, and the images you have here show the long-term dry condition. So the blue river as drawn would not be blue at the time of this analysis.
Understood.
Yep.
And then your testimony is that the one-to-one relationship between the river well pumping and the depletion of surface flows is not realistic, as you testified, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Will the surface flow in the late fall or early winter months in the river refill the underflow aquifer and offset all the drawdown effects from pumping at Site B?
Yeah, the answer to that is obvious on CDFW 86, which is the hydrograph for the area that strongly support a yes answer to that. Since well, several decades, the water level has been above the Thalweg elevation, which isn't really the answer to your question. However, they do show that in the recent years, the water level has fully recharged to a set level in response to those flows.
Doesn't that mean that there's a one-to-one relationship then?
Well, we're talking about one-to-one relationship of removal versus a one-to-one relationship of recharge. They're two separate issues. I'd be glad to talk about them separately, but I don't believe we can talk about them. I think I'd rather talk about them separately.
Okay. Is there, I guess, a follow-up question to that, is it a factor of time lag?
So is your question whether we're saying the same thing at different timescales? I don't know. I don't understand your question.
Well, my question was, it sounded to me from your testimony that basically you stated that, or let me put it this way, what I implied, and I want to make sure I'm not mischaracterizing your testimony, is that the surface flow in late fall and early winter, as I described, would refill the underflow aquifer and offset all the drawdown effects from pumping at Site B. And I think you said, yes, that is the case. And you cited CDFW 86. And forgive me because I'm not a hydrogeologist, but I thought that had something to do with the one-to-one relationship that you're seeing, that you said was completely unrealistic. And I'm just trying to understand that relationship.
Great. So perhaps it's a timing issue, but I'll try to answer that if you don't mind. So the use of the one-to-one removal occurs while pumping. The oversimplification of the use of one-to-one pumping implies that pumping of the city's project will pull water directly from an adjacent flowing river. And that is what we refer to over and over again as an oversimplification that we provided for a prior hearing order to address an absolute worst case scenario, which we say is not realistic. Stetson agrees. They show a loss of on the order of 300 acre feet a year from their pumping at 2,400 acre feet a year. And that is much, much, much less in the removal of surface flow than one-to-one. In fact, the removal of 300 acre feet a year from the city's modeled pumping with a much more sophisticated model than either of these, which is the Santinez hydrologic model that indeed considers more inflow and outflow than our Tice analysis, assumed that 12% of the water removed was removed from streamflow from the Lompoc Narrows gauge. Our analysis, our one-to-one assumption, assumed a higher rate of 0.7 to 1.8 versus our 1.4, and therefore is way more conservative. So to answer your question, come back to your original question. The removal of one-to-one is a pumping question. The recharge is not relevant to any one-to-one discussions.
But doesn't that mean that there'd be a permanent decline in the underflow water level?
It's not permanent. It comes back every year.
Okay.
It's the temporal issue. It might be an annual issue that when the river disappears into the subsurface, as it does, it is recharged annually. There's no permanent loss, but instead it is recharged by those releases.
And forgive me, I don't recall, did you provide any testimony as to the duration of that?
Duration of what?
Of the temporary decline in the underflow water level?
Well, that's the 6-month period we're discussing here is the maximum length of that period. If it wasn't addressed as a specific sentence that addresses the answer directly, I'm remiss. But that was the intent of the 6-month period that we modeled, starting in paragraph, I think, 65.
Understood. Thank you. And then what conditions cause the river depletion
Mr.
from?
Puccini, let me just pause for a moment here because I am holding us to a hard stop at 5 p.m. So I wanted to
Okay.
see if you have more than one or two, which I think this has been very useful to me, frankly. So I'm going to be a little bit flexible about time here, but
Okay.
do you have more than just 2 minutes more, do you think?
I think I can get through it in two.
Okay. Let's
And
try
if not, then yeah, okay. Okay. And then in a few places in your testimony, you address whether pools in the river will be disconnected. Do you remember that?
Okay.
Okay. And I think in your previous testimony, you talked about what you mean by a disconnected river, correct?
I don't recall using, I don't remember using the phrase disconnected pools, but.
Okay. Well, trying to be in the interest of time. Can you take a look at Solvang 5, page 23?
Yeah, just search for that phrase and don't see it in there. So anyway, help would.
Yeah, what we're talking about is the term disconnected. So that appears in page 23 at line 8.
I was looking at the wrong document. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll be brief. 23, line 8.
Line 8. Yeah, and also on page 24, lines 4 and 18.
Which one should we do for 24, 4, and 18?
Let's do 24. Yeah,
Okay.
24 reads any pools disconnected from surface flows, etc. And I'm just trying to get an understanding of how you define the term or what you mean by the term disconnected.
So 24, if I may, it refers to the Hopkins report and their conclusions there, right?
That's correct.
So if we could instead refer to perhaps my own use of the phrase on the prior page.
Yes, that would be fine. Thank you.
Great. And could you remind me of which line that was? Line 7?
Yes, that was line 8 on page 23.
Line 8 on page 23. That reads, you see it there? Near the Alisol Bridge, there would be no effect on a pool beyond a distance of 500 feet after pumping a well for 24 hours, even if it's disconnected from surface flow.
Yes.
Sure. So a pool that is disconnected from surface flow will not be depleted if the subsurface water is, if it's 500 feet or more from the city's project, because that's the radius of influence of that pumping, that pumping rate.
Okay, I think I understand. And then does a river fully disconnect when the subsurface water level declines below the river thalweg?
Pumping, yeah, dropping subsurface water levels when they're disconnected disconnects the effect.
Okay, I understand your point. And then this is the underflow. I'm going to strike that question. When a river does become disconnected, does the seepage to the subsurface suddenly stop?
No, the water can fall through the riverbed when the subsurface level is below the riverbed elevation.
Thank you. But if it does stop, if that seepage were to stop, that means that the winter flows couldn't backfill the storage that's lost with pumping when the river's disconnected, correct?
Water flowing in the river will fall down through the riverbed. I don't know how to answer your question. It will recharge the aquifer, whether it's disconnected or connected or disconnected. The point that's missed, oh, sorry, in the interest of time, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, that helps me understand, I think, what you mean by disconnected in the context of your testimony, so thank you. Two more questions. Is the seepage rate of the river flow?
I think of Mr. Puccini, I think we will, because I'm going to hold us, I'd like to take 4 minutes just to pause. So let's pick up. I will give you, 1 or 2 more questions when we meet again on Wednesday. But let's pause here. First of all, thanks to both of you, and particularly Mr. Nicely, thank you for hanging on to late in the day. And in advance, thank you for showing up first thing on Wednesday morning. And I'll look to the room briefly. Can we, Mr. Wooldridge, if you would please take down this exhibit and I can see the room a little better. But I just wanted to check in and see if there's anything we need to discuss in the next 4 minutes. Otherwise, my plan is to break for the day. And then we don't meet tomorrow. We will be together again Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Is there anything else?
Just
Yeah.
have one question. So just to understand what you were saying, there'll be a little time Wednesday just to finish up with a few questions I have, but will there also be a little time to give?
There'll be a little time. Yes, I am going to allow, I at least want to see if Caltrout and NIMS have questions. We are up against the 1 hour, which I talked about, but as I said, this is, I think you used less than your time for some of the other witnesses, and this has been productive for me, so I will allow that.
And the remaining questions will take a very short amount of time. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anything else as I look to the room? All right, well, thank you very much. I will see you on Wednesday morning. Thanks to all of you and all of the witnesses, and thank you to all of you today for your professionalism and everything. I think we moved along fairly quickly, so I appreciate it. And I will see you on Wednesday morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.